Good evening, I'm Mike Graham, he's Mike Parry. You're listening to Two Mikes, another big week of fascinating facts, dubious opinions and political intrigue as we prepare to reveal what everyone's been up to over the last few days. For my part, I've been spending a great deal of time at a famous seat of learning. Meanwhile, Porky has been studying his journals, as usual. We'll be speaking to the newly crowned Scrabble world champion and finding out why restaurants are getting so much noisier. Also, it's Listography tonight. You tell us what three things you want us to describe and we'll do it later on in the show. You're listening to the Two Mikes with me, Mike Graham, and Mike Parry. It's time to say a very good evening to Mr. Mike, a Porky, a Parry. Very good evening to you.
And a very good evening to you, Mike. And you're absolutely right. It's been a pretty exciting weekend, one way or another. If we include this morning as the weekend, when you went and saw your delightful daughter pick up her master's degree.
That's
is that
right? I did indeed. Yeah, I found myself sort of circling around with lots and lots of very, very
pictures of that, by the way.
Very. Yeah, well, there's a couple of pictures put out on Twitter.
Okay. Has she got a mortarboard on?
She had a mortarboard on. Yeah,
that's excellent.
And in fact, I tried it on for size, and some people rather unkindly suggested I looked a bit like Tommy Cooper.
Yeah, you probably would have done.
But yeah, very unusual for me to be mixing with such academic types.
Yes, exactly.
And it was quite a lovely occasion. It was great to be there.
Yes.
But it does kind of go on a bit.
And where was this?
It was at University College London. It was in the middle of Bedford Square, where they'd erected a big sort of... Bedford Square, just off Gower Street, sort of behind the British Museum.
British Museum.
It's all owned by sort of University College around there.
Now, does that mean now that she is Emma Graham, M.A.?
She is indeed, yeah.
Right.
Master of Arts.
But has she been an Emma Graham BSc before this, or BA or something?
Well, she's never really used the letters. I think she's a BA, yeah.
Right, so it could be Emma Graham, BA, MA. Or
could be, BA, MA, Bama, Emma Bama.
Once you get to the MA, do you drop the BA, so to speak?
Because
it's a more senior
I must admit, I mean, if you ever see somebody with one of those business cards that's got MA written after it, you always think, what a complete and utter piece of twaddle that is.
The ones that I think are most of a joke are when these people are in something like the world of consulting or something, and they have qualifications like 60 letters long.
Loads of letters. You don't know what any of them are.
No, it's wrong.
Fellow
rubbish.
of the Association of Cheese
have,
Carvers or something.
If I'd have pursued my career in urban estate management at the University of Trent...
It did strike me, actually, when I was sitting there, that here's something you've never sat through, a graduation ceremony, because you've never graduated.
Well, you never have either.
Well, yeah, I know, but I've sat through that graduation ceremony before.
Yeah, okay. Well, you with your son, of course.
Yeah, with my daughter, yeah.
And your daughter,
well, I went to a high school graduation in America,
oh, really?
which is a very different kettle of fish altogether.
Yeah.
Because there was about 5,000 people there.
Yeah.
And it was held in a basketball arena.
Right.
It was massive. Went on for hours.
It goes on for hours, doesn't it? No, what I was going to say is I would have been an associate of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, ARICS.
Right.
And then, of course, I would have very, very quickly, within 2 years, have got the senior qualification.
Fellow or something like
that. Yes, that's right, FRICS, Fellow of the... But, believe it or not,
I've seen that FRICS.
Yeah, FRICS. Believe it or not, that's exactly what my niece is.
Is that right?
Yeah, my niece is a chartered surveyor.
But does she use it in the business card?
Well, I haven't seen one of her business cards because I know her number, if you see what I mean.
I see,
so,
yeah.
It's in my phone.
I mean, when I got business cards when I was younger, and she's quite young, I always used to give them out to members of my family because they thought it was quite a mark of respect.
Maybe.
So a business card. Problem with business cards, right, when I was in newspapers, every time I would get the business card, I'd usually been in the job for a couple of months or something, it'd take a while to get them. And then suddenly I wouldn't be doing the job anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be moved out of it. So I've got stacks of business cards at home, which I've never given to anyone.
I'm exactly the same. I've got, for some unknown reason, when you get a job, do you want a business card? Oh, okay, and then you put all the information on it. And then they send you like 6 boxes.
Right.
And I'm not joking.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever gave more than half a dozen away.
Exactly.
So I'm like you at home. There is a drawer at home.
There must be a use
occasionally
for them.
I open it and it says Deputy Editor, Daily Express.
Right.
Sorry, Deputy News. No, Deputy News Editor, Daily Express.
Well, the other thing is I started to get a bit superstitious about it because I thought as soon as the business cards arrive, I'm going to get fired and moved on somewhere else.
Yeah, that usually happens.
Which is often something that happened as well.
Now then, talking about last night, of course.
Last night?
Poldark was on.
It was, yeah.
But that was after the England football.
I tried to watch it, actually, but I have to say, there's not much going on,
I thought it was brilliant.
You like it, really?
Yeah, I do. I think it's great.
It's a lot of sort of overacting and sort of staring into space. And,
but don't you love the wild Cornish... No, it's not Cornish, it's Devon, actually. Devonian...
It's meant to be Cornwall,
isn't Cornwall, that's right, yeah.
I mean, the scenery is lovely. The scenery is lovely, but I mean, how many times can you watch a guy riding a horse along the top of a cliff?
No, I think it's great, because then you're saying to yourself, I think I'm going to buy a cottage now on the edge of that cliff and live there forever. The problem is, if you did that,
you won't be able to hear talk radio down there.
No,
you won't be able
to
get 3G either. Probably.
No, and if you did that, it would seem like paradise for about 2 days.
Yeah.
And then you'd think, hang on, there's nobody else around.
Very quiet.
Where's the pub?
Yeah.
There isn't one. Where's the shop?
Well, if there is a pub, it's about a 4-mile drive.
Well, a 4-mile ride on a horse,
and it's the only one within 20 miles.
Absolutely.
So you walk in and everybody knows who you are.
Yeah, funny enough, I worked with a guy once on the Chester Chronicle, right? And he'd come from mid-Wales. And when he went home at the weekends to see his parents, he was the same age as me, about 19 or something.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh no," he said, "it's great." He said, "My folks have got a farm in mid Wales."
Yeah.
And it's like, it's amongst hills and all that. He said, when I go to the pub, he said, I literally come out of the back door of the farm yard.
Yeah.
I go and get a horse out the stable. And
a horse?
Yeah, a horse. And I gallop over fields for about 10 minutes to the nearest local pub.
And is he allowed to then ride the horse back if he's had a few drinks?
This is exactly the point.
Yeah.
He tied the horse up outside the pub along with a lot of other horses. It was like a Wild West saloon.
Goodness me.
Yeah, and they get absolutely...
They surely don't do that still.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm talking now about like 30 years ago. And I get absolutely bladderated, And I said, "How did you get home?" He said, "On the horse." I said, "But hang on, I mean,
In the dark.
Exactly.
Without any light.
I said, motorbikes have lights, cars have lights, even bikes have lights.
Well, also, he's not on the road, is he? He's going across fields.
He's going across fields. And he said, the horse knows. He said, you have to realise that when you're on a horse, I said, I mean, do you literally gallop on this horse, a bit like Robin Hood and all that? He said, not really. He said
Canter. Perhaps.
He said the horse goes its own pace. He said, but did you realise that one of the sensitivities a horse has is that when it is galloping, if it's approaching a hedge or a wall, it can feel the air pressure coming back against it, so it knows it's coming up to an object.
It still sounds a bit dangerous to me.
And he says, and it jumps.
Right.
And I said, how much would you have? He said, 8 or 9 pints.
Really?
He said, I just hung on to the neck of the horse and it just jumped and we just went over things.
Sounds terrifying.
It does, yeah, but he was brought up in it, and he knew this horse very well. It was his horse and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
The horse got him home.
You have to be careful you didn't get on the wrong horse, I suppose, when you came out.
Well, I think they could recognise their own horses.
Well, they run you back to the wrong house.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a very romantic way to still be drinking in what was then the 20th century.
Well, it's romantic, but it's not very practical, is it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I tell you what,
you can hardly stop for a kebab on the way home on the horse.
You can't stop for a kebab, but I don't think you can be done for drunk in charge of a horse.
I'm sure you could if you were on a road.
Well, he won't. Then on the road, that's the point. They won't go across fields, and obviously we don't want anybody to start getting into vehicles when they're intoxicated and all that,
or indeed onto the back of a horse.
Well, yeah, I think you can because the horse is doing the thinking for you, isn't it?
Really?
The horse is basic. I mean, the horse knew the way home, by the way, because they'd made this journey 1,000 times. You know what I mean? So that wasn't any problem to the horse.
Right.
And actually,
did the horse have a name?
Well, if he did, he didn't tell me. But actually, the horse used to get bored. So if he knew what time it was to go home. Because, the horse would start sort of, snorting.
What, whinnying? What, outside?
And baying outside, yeah. And when it was time to go home, he knew it was time to go home. Because if not,
a strange thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Because if not, the horse might not go on strike. But if he had to wait too long, the horse would lie down.
Yeah.
And he'd come out and the horse would be lying down. And he'd say, oh, come on.
It's not something you see very often,
No, it's not. No, it's not. And well, you do sometimes in their stables, if you see what I mean, on straw and all that kind of stuff. And then he'd have to wait until the horse felt like getting up again and take him home.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it was a classic
bizarre way to live.
Well,
I don't think you'd have to live like that in Cornwall, though. I think you're doing Cornwall a slight disservice. I mean, Cornwall's a very fashionable county.
Yeah, but hang on. I'm talking about Cornwall in the 17th century, aren't I?
Well, you're not going to be living there in the 17th century.
Comparing it to Mid Wales in the 20th century.
The problem with Poldark, though, right, is that it's all about this sort of social justice thing that's going on, right?
It is, yeah.
And he's this great sort of hero of the working man. And every so often he has to take his shirt off to prove how beautifully buff he is.
Well, you see, you're going to get body envy. We're all going to get body envy.
I couldn't care less. I don't care what this guy looks like.
No,
because he's a very wooden actor, in my view.
I think he's great. And men are now going to get body envy because...
Why?
Well, for years, right, women have had body envy. Women have seen these wonderful, beautiful actresses, people like Halle Berry, was it, who got out of the sea in a James Bond film.
Bond film, yeah. I've got some news for you on that, by the way.
Oh, okay. Going back as far as Bridget Bardot and all this kind of stuff.
Well, that's also because they've been bombarded with it in magazines and newspapers and all the rest of it.
Well, it's now going the other way.
I mean, newspapers have tried that, haven't they? They've tried doing the sort of, the topless male picture instead of the page 3 girl and all that. Nobody cares. Because nobody's that interested.
No, it never worked. But the first one, I think, had to be old Daniel, the current James Bond.
Craig.
Coming out of the water in his budgie smugglers, you know what I mean? Apparently women were passing out in cinemas and all this kind of stuff,
Apparently so.
And from there it's gone to Poldark, and then of course there was Tom Hiddleston having a bit of rumpy-pumpy with his trousers halfway down his Aris, you know what I mean? Which,
Thank you very much.
It's
a family show, you know.
Yeah, I know, it's a family show. One has to, worry about.
The time, by the way.
No, don't worry about the time, also there's plenty of time to talk about these things. Lots more to talk about anyway.
Yeah, I don't want to just talk about Poldark all night.
No, we're not talking about Poldark all night.
Body envy either, which you've obviously got for some bizarre reason.
No, I haven't.
I'm also going to tell you about some misbehaviour at the graduation ceremony as well.
I'd like to hear about
So we'll have some of that as well. We're going to be talking to the World Scrabble champion, though, coming up very shortly. He's a young man over in France. He won it with a fantastic word, by the way, called bracconid. You know what that is?
Nope.
Bracconid is a type of wasp.
Those are the words I find that come up in Scrabble nobody's ever heard of anyway.
Really?
You have to be technically brilliant to be able to prove it's a word.
Yeah, but you don't have to be technically brilliant just to play Scrabble. So I'll ask you about that coming up in a little while as well. We are the Two Mics.
It's only words, and words are all I have to take your heart away.
Now, you might say that you and I have made a living out of words in various forms, whether the written word or the spoken word over the course of several decades.
Whenever we get into that, I always like to play the joke on you by playing that song. Words don't come easy to me.
Yes.
I don't know which group that is. But
Yes, I can't remember either.
I always try to make out that you've scraped your way through a living. But no, you're absolutely right. Words have been the core centre of our profession for a good 30 years.
And yet you were saying to Sam Delaney a little bit earlier, just before we started the show, that you've never really played Scrabble.
Well, I don't think I'm bright enough to play Scrabble because the people you play against do have a huge locker full of secret words, which must be Scrabble words, I suppose.
Well, they're not just Scrabble words, but we're going to talk to the World Scrabble champion now, Brett Smitheram, who's from Romford, over in Chingford, I should say, rather, in Essex. And he defeated fellow Briton Mark Nyman in 3 straight rounds over in France just the other day. And we're going to talk to you now. Brett, a very good evening to you.
Hello, guys.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Congratulations on being the World Scrabble champion.
Thank you so much. It's still sinking in.
Have you been given a hero's welcome back in Chingford?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've had a sedan chair waiting for me,
Excellent.
Palm leaves left on the street. I can barely move.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I mean, I was reading a piece about your victory in no less an organ than the New York Times, right? In which they were talking about your method of remembering the words, which is quite interesting, because it's not just, as Mike Parry here was saying, knowing a lot of words. It's actually just being able to remember words, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, at the end of the day, you're using words as a weapon in a game. So, therefore, I mean, it's great to know the meaning, but it's not a necessity. I'm quite unusual among Scrabble players. I do know a lot of the meanings, just not all of them.
Right.
How do you prepare to be a Scrabble champion, Brett? Because some of these words are so unusual and so far removed from everyday language, if you see what I mean. Do you literally spend hours poring through a dictionary or a thesaurus to try and find strange words which you can then utilise in your Scrabble competitions?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, there are computer programs that exist that can distill lists from the dictionaries of the most useful words. So basically you prioritise. So I wouldn't necessarily try and learn everything, but I might learn the top, say, 70,000 words that are most likely to come up in a game.
Yes. I mean, I was told years ago when I was a schoolboy that the longest word in the English language is anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Correct.
Is that still the case?
That's not the case. The longest word in the English language is pneumono-ultramicroscopic silico-volcanoconiosis.
Oh, lovely. Thanks very much for filling us in on that one.
But you couldn't actually get that onto a Scrabble board, could you?
No, I don't think so.
No, you couldn't. You'd have to go around the edge about 3 times, I think.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I play Scrabble with my kids occasionally. And I mean, whenever I have tried to play Scrabble with grown-ups, which sometimes happens on holidays or something like that, it's always pathetic. You know, you're always doing really, really bad short words like she and thee. And, I mean, the idea that you've got something like 70,000 words in your head at any one time, does that not interfere with generally the way that you operate? Like when you speak, the words not come into your head?
No, not at all. It's funny you mentioned the kids. I mean, there's a huge, thriving kids population, youth Scrabble movement at the moment. I mean, a lot of the guys who were doing the best over there in Lille this weekend were actually from the Pakistan Scrabble Association. They're absolutely fantastic. So sometimes it does get in the way. Sometimes I start anagramming things when I should be talking. But yeah, generally speaking, I can live life normally. I don't stand out in the street.
Okay, that's great. Now, Brett, one of the words that one of your winning words was variedly, okay? So obviously we all know what varied means. Then you put an ly on the end. You got 95 points for that. Now, is this the influence of American English? Because, for instance, we've been newspaper reporters all our life, Mike Graham and I. The first time I sent a report back from New York saying that Mick Jagger had been hospitalised, I was nearly sacked because they said hospitalised is not an English word. Do you understand what I mean? So where do the parameters of what is acceptable English language lie?
Oh, you see, English and American English are still English. Yeah. So in Scrabble, any of that would be allowed. Right. I've heard of arguments about whether slang should be allowed. But again, slang, whether it's good or bad, is all allowed in Scrabble. Right. So yeah, basically, if you speak it in any English-speaking country, then it's allowed in Scrabble.
Right, OK. Well, we've got a word that we use amongst ourselves when we do some live shows or sometimes, and it's called bladderization, which means...
Sometimes shortened to bladderation.
Yeah, or bladderation or bladderized, which is an extreme form of intoxication. Would that be acceptable in a Scrabble competition?
Probably not, but I think pixelated also means the same thing, and it probably scores more because it's got an X in it.
Right, I see. Well, pixelated really means rubbing somebody's face out, which again could apply to us.
Well,
obviously.
it's another. There's lots of different slang words. But,
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be necessarily. Does it have to be in the Urban Dictionary, or does it have to be in any kind of dictionary? Is what you're saying?
There's a mix of dictionaries. We use the Collins Dictionary and a number of American source dictionaries. So basically, Scrabble is made up of a number of different sources brought together into one.
Okay. Now you're a recruitment consultant. So did you have to take time off? You had to play 3 games. I presume, was there a quarter-final, a semi-final before this? How long were you away?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started playing last Wednesday. The 24 round, basically qualifying tournament, which led then onto quarterfinals, which was a best of 3. Semi-finals, which was a best of 5, and then the final, which I played on Sunday, which was a best of 5 as well. So in total, given how many I won, I played 34 games before claiming victory.
Excellent. Now, for that victory, and I support capitalism, by the way, Brett, you've got a €7,000 prize, okay?
What's it got to do with capitalism?
Well, because I'm asking, does that make you a professional Scrabble player?
I would say over the years I've probably just about made a little bit of a profit. Yeah. But unfortunately, while I think Scrabble is one of the most accessible, and I would call it a sport out there, there just isn't the money behind it at the moment.
Call it a sport?
So I would absolutely.
It's certainly a game, isn't it?
Well, we use it. We're still developing muscles. The brain is a muscle. We have to develop a huge amount of stamina. Because if you think about it, I've just been playing Scrabble for 34 hours, more or less solidly. Yeah. And if you're not physically fit, then you're going to lose your edge. So I've had this discussion many times, but I think Scrabble's also as accessible as, say, tennis. When you're a kid, you can play it as soon as you can pick up a racket. Yeah, Scrabble, you can play it as soon as you can spell a 2-letter word.
Yeah, yeah.
And has Scrabble changed over the years? It's more or less the same game, isn't it, that it's always been, apart from, say, the introduction of newer words?
Competitive Scrabble has changed. We used to, in the UK, play what you call high score, which is basically the two of you are more or less having a gentleman's agreement that you won't get in the way of your opponent. So the idea being that whoever has scored most total points at the end of a tournament wins. But we shifted to what we now call match play, which is much more cutthroat. So you're just all out to get in the way of your opponent and score more points than them. It's probably the purer form, and it's probably the form that most people play at home with their grandmothers.
OK. Now, Brett, answer me this question, please. A serious question. Some people's brains are massively stimulated by a moderate input of alcohol, right? Yes. Darts players...
You might say they'd be sedated, though, wouldn't you?
Well, and this is what I'm saying. So, some people use alcohol as an upper. For some people, it's a downer. What are the rules on what you can ingest in your body before a tournament?
There are absolutely no rules at all. I've known people who turned up massively hungover in tournaments and done really, really well.
Yeah.
So there's no random drug testing then either?
No random drug testing, and I'm never going to admit this, but I must say after I've had a couple of drinks, I find that the letters generally swim round by themselves.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Now, can you actually do that in the view of your opponent, or do you have to do it before you go into the room?
You can do whatever you want in front of your opponent, as long as it doesn't cause suspicion, I think, is the official rule. So as long as they're aware of what you're doing, just tell them you're about to down a pint, I think you're fine.
So you could walk in literally with a large gin and tonic.
Why are you bringing drink into this?
No, because as I said, because Brett has already said. He said he has a couple of drinks sometimes, and the letters and words are swinging around in his head. So it's a stimulant, isn't it?
It can be, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, but equally, you get a little bit overconfident, and therefore your tactical game goes out the window. Yeah. So it swings and roundabouts.
Exactly right.
Tactics in
So how long will you be off the game, as it were, before you have to start practicing for next year's finals?
Oh, that's a good question. I just want to take a bit of a break now because my brain's totally fried. I've already had people approach me to go to a big money tournament over in Niagara Falls.
Ooh.
I've had someone approach me to go to an even bigger money tournament that's being held over in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
When you say big money, what sort of big money?
The Malaysian tournament last time I went was $30,000 first prize.
It's worth winning, isn't it?
Niagara, I'm not sure yet.
Did you win? Did you win in Malaysia?
That's a sore point. I was 2.5 games clear of the second place going to the final day, and I didn't believe jet lag was a thing at that point. Right. And then it hit me on the final day, so I came third.
And what was the prize? What was prize money for third?
It was about 10,000, I think.
That's not bad.
Wasn't anything to sniff at.
Still covers all your expenses for a hobby, really, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It keeps me in gear before I play Scrabble.
Yeah. And when you're practicing before you go to these tournaments, who do you play against? Yeah. Do you have to find? I mean, it must be difficult finding people who are as good as you.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm quite lucky because I live in London. We've got a few absolute world-class players here. Yeah. And before this tournament, I was rated number 3 in the world. We have the number 2 rated player here in the world, so I do play him. But equally, I've got access to a number of great Scrabble playing programs. So I know it's a little bit less sociable, but I can sit at home playing on my laptop if I want to play someone who plays perfectly.
So it's a bit like some of these chess masters who play their computer to find out what sort of moves can come up, are they?
Yeah, and actually a lot of players at the top level, once they've played a game, they'll keep a track of what letters they've had, and there's a computer program you can put those letters through, and it will tell you what the best move is, and how your move ranks against it. The idea is, you can judge how close to perfect you played.
Okay, very good.
Fantastic. So who have you been celebrating the win with?
Well, my girlfriend, who I haven't seen in over a week,
right.
And I had to get sign off to buy the champagne from her, so I got that straight away. She's sort of waiting home for me tonight. I'm just heading back now. So
splendid. We'll have a very, very fabulous rest of the evening.
Brilliant.
And good luck next year, Brett. Thanks very much.
Well done, Brett.
Brilliant.
You are a true British champion. We're very proud of you.
Yeah, we've got a lot.
Cheers,
after
guys.
that performance by England the other night, actually, this
Exactly.
sounds like a bit more of a thing to cheer for.
Exactly.
Brett Smitherham there from Chingford, who defeated fellow Briton Mark Nyman, who apparently used to be a former world champion, but also used to be producer of Countdown as well. Yeah, so apparently that was why he was such an expert in Scrabble.
So he's really linked into word
Maybe
games.
you and I should have a game of Scrabble at some point.
I don't think so, but I do love this word that Brett used. Periagua.
Periagua, yeah.
Periagua. Do you know what it is?
It's a dugout canoe.
That's right, used by the American Indians.
Yeah.
That's pretty good,
Only
isn't it?
76 points you get for that.
Yeah, 76 points, yeah. So that dugout canoe, that means you chop down a big redwood tree.
Yeah.
And then actually all you do...
Well, any kind of tree.
Well, the redwoods are the widest ones. They've got the biggest circumference.
That'd be more like a ship, rather than a canoe.
Yeah. But what you do is then you chop out the inside of the canoe. So the inside of the tree. So you've got a canoe. Yeah. Why doesn't it roll over?
I don't know. We'll have to get a canoeing expert on.
Yeah, exactly.
They probably have to shape the thing as well.
Probably have to shape it, and they probably put a couple of what do you call it, like stabilisers on each side. No, a couple of stabilisers. Yeah. They don't use oars; they use paddles.
Right. Okay.
Baby, you can paddle my canoe. You must have heard that expression, haven't you?
Up the creek without a paddle.
I think so.
So you never knew Scrabble could be that interesting, did you?
No, I didn't actually. That was quite illuminating. Yeah. Quite enlightening.
Well, apparently one of the things that Brett has said in the past is that basically memorising the definition of words uses up valuable brain space.
Yes.
Which must be what you do. Because you obviously use up an awful lot of your very valuable brain space by memorising things.
Do you know what? It's funny you should say that, but I came across a scientific report actually recently to say that the use of mobile phones by people, who start when they're 12 or 13 is actually blocking out space in their brain for anything else.
Why?
Well, because they're not learning to think. They're not learning to think. They're not learning to analyse. They're taking all their information from a little screen in front of them. Yeah. They talk only to their mates. They don't have social, vocal intercourse with other people.
What you mean? Because they're texting people all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is doing your brain no good at all. It's making... What I'm saying is that because you only do these things, right... it stops your brain from doing other things. Here, I've got the report here because I was studying this afternoon. Google searches, Wikipedia and digital photography are making it harder for us to remember information without the aid of a computer. Yeah. The upside of having lives pervaded by wireless connected technology is that we can free up more of our mental resources by outsourcing unnecessary tasks to smartphones, to tablets, to laptops.
Well, how many times in a day would you say that you look something up on Google? Like, just something you're thinking about?
Half a dozen.
Half a dozen times?
Yeah.
Really? That often?
What do you think? Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, I do it during the show quite often.
Exactly.
But, I mean,
that's
just as a general way of sometimes you're with people, they're Googling stuff all the time.
Absolutely. But Baroness Greenfield, who is a neuroscientist at the University of Oxford, very fine establishment.
Indeed.
I went for the interview
there, of course, when I was at the University College London today,
yes.
they mentioned Oxford and Cambridge quite a bit. Yeah. And, of course, at the time when University College London started, back in about 190 years ago, they said one of the reasons they started it was because Oxford and Cambridge at that time would only let you in if you were from the Church of England and you were a man. And so they actually started UCL.
And the aristocracy.
In order to let in people from different faiths, in order to let in women, and all that sort of thing. So Oxford and Cambridge actually has a pretty hideous history of single-mindedness, which is not good.
Well, I'm very pleased that UCL has flourished in such a fabulous way.
Indeed.
But it says that Baroness Greenfield, University of Oxford, a neuroscientist and former director of the Royal Institution, have said that games consoles and other digital devices could now be seriously harmful. She says that she says several experiments indicate that cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading? What's that?
Cognitive offloading, in which tools make reminders or calculations easier, so you don't have to add up, for instance.
Right.
This all started with calculators, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of you saying 9 7s are 63,
right,
you'd go 9 times 7 equals, right?
Yeah.
Which idiot would do that? Why
can't
you just
a lot of
make that
people
out in your
have
head?
to do that because they can't do it in their head.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So this is cognitive offloading, okay? It does impair memory, but the effect can be put against the amount of cognitive power it releases for creative thinking.
Well, that's the point. So as long as you're using your brain for something else,
yes,
and you're just saying, right, I'll allow Google and I'll allow calculator and I'll allow all sorts of other things to do the menial tasks for me.
Absolutely.
As long as you're doing something else with your brain, that's okay. But if you're not, then it's not.
That's absolutely right. Let's get this absolutely straight. What the scientists are saying is remembering your shopping list or an appointment is not the most effective use of your cognitive resource, but you lose the ability to do it if you're depending every moment of every day on a little machine in your hand to think for you.
Yeah, exactly right.
You see?
And also the thing with kids playing on computer games as well is that if they're not actually going out and playing what they call imaginatively, where they're going out and sort of, making up characters and running around in the woods and all that kind of thing, then they're not actually using that part of their brain either.
No, that's
so
absolutely
they're being less than creative.
Yeah, that's absolutely
There
right.
was a couple of people today, actually, I thought you would be rather dismissive of, because at the end there was all these people getting master's degrees. At the very end, there was 5 people getting Doctor of Philosophy degrees.
Yeah.
But there was one getting a Doctor of Philosophy in public policy. Yeah. And I couldn't quite work out why you'd need to be a philosopher to know about public policy. There's another one getting one in economics, another one getting one in the politics of South America. A Doctor of Philosophy.
I have never worked out what a philosopher is supposed to be.
Well, a philosopher is supposed to be a thinker.
Yeah, okay. So
somebody who ponders something, and the dean of the place explained what it was all about. Yeah. A Doctor of Philosophy is somebody who's had to work on a particular way of thinking, a particular theory about something.
Is that right?
And something completely new, basically. So you'd never be able to do it because everything you've ever done has been stolen from somebody else.
No, that's not
true.
You
would be found out if you tried to apply to be a Doctor of Philosophy.
No, that is completely untrue, and I don't usually balk at you making these ridiculous assertions about me, but I have been a pathfinder in a lot of original thinking.
You have
a lot of original thinking.
A lot of original thinking, but about specific things, not in terms of a kind of a rather airy-fairy philosophy type thing.
I think a lot of philosophers, so-called philosophers, are just con men. I mean, for instance, I read a book review recently. I didn't even bother bringing it to your attention on Karl Marx.
Oh yeah.
Now he's the guy buried in Highgate Ceremony, isn't he?
Highgate Ceremony.
Highgate
Cemetery.
Cemetery.
Yes.
Sorry, not ceremony.
There may have been a ceremony there as well.
There might have been, yeah. But he, with a big.
Well, there's a great big statue.
Yeah, the bearded head and all that kind of stuff. Well, I read a book about him.
He lived in Primrose Hill with Engels.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I read a book of him recently. I mean, he was a lazy, idle, drunken bum.
Yeah, but Das Kapital, right, was the seminal work by him.
But he never finished writing it.
But it was all about a new form of society.
No, but did you know he never finished writing it?
Well, many of these works
He spent about 10 years writing it, Das Kapital,
But you see, that's what I mean. You're dismissive of anyone with any intellectual capacity.
No, I'm not.
Because you only see things in black and white, and if it's no good, if there's no absolute use to you, you just dismiss it.
This guy was a womanizer. He used to run around town telling people he was a genius and all this kind of thing.
Well, I think people told him he was a genius.
Yeah, Das. Yeah, well, he used to talk complete, Bolloxios, for want of a better word. You know what I mean?
Maybe you should read Das Kapital.
Everybody would. Do you remember the film? What was it called? That Peter Sellers was in.
Dr. Strangelove?
No. I'm Chase the Gardener.
Oh, that one, yeah.
What was that called? That film?
Being There.
Yeah, Being There. That's right. I'm Chase the Gardener. I mean, it strikes me a lot of these philosophers just go down that route. Chase the Gardener has never left the house for 40 years. And when the billionaire master dies and everybody moves in from the company, they find Chase in the main room and they think he's the genius philosopher. And they say,
he's a man of very few words.
Yes, very few words. And he they say to him things like, "What do you think's going to happen now, Chase?" What's his name, Chase?
I don't remember.
Chasey, yeah, Chase. I'm Chasey the gardener.
Right.
Wasn't that his name?
Chauncey, wasn't it?
Chauncey. I'm Chauncey the gardener. And they say, "Oh yeah, that's
but
very."
Would he not make sort of references to things in the garden?
No, this
everything in the garden is rosy.
No, absolutely.
Or everything in the garden is beautiful.
They'd say, "Hey, Chauncey, what's going to happen now?" "I don't know. I'm just the gardener. And when I plant the bulbs in spring, they will flower in the autumn, and the world will be a much better place." Hey, did you get that, guys? It's like that. I believe most philosophers are like that.
Well, I think again you're oversimplifying. It's a bit like the Tom Hanks film as well, wasn't it? Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump, yeah.
Where Forrest Gump was thought to be some kind of great.
That's right. Yeah,
seer.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think you're doing disservice to philosophers.
The other guy was
certain philosophers who have written about society as it was emerging.
Well, what bit of philosophy have you ever thought was great?
Well, I mean, I would say Jean-Paul Sartre, who wrote The Roads to Freedom, who was something of an existentialist philosopher, right? I think he was brilliant.
And what bit of advice have you taken from him?
Well, it wasn't so much that you take advice from him, but you read what they write and you get into their mindset. And
have you ever read anything that Jung has written?
Jung, no, I haven't.
He's the German philosopher.
I've read Hobbes, a bit of Hobbes. He wrote a book called Leviathan. Right,
Hobbes,
yeah, Hobbes.
Sounds like a cough suite.
Not like the women's clothing shop.
Yeah, sounds like a cough suite. I mean,
you can't just dismiss him because his name doesn't sound right.
Okay, now you say the philosophers are thinkers, right? Now,
when I was young, that was when I read all this stuff. I read it when I was kind of 18, 19.
It's drivel. It's all drivel.
But it's not drivel at all. What did you read when you were 19?
When I was 19, I was probably reading
comics.
No, Harold Robbins.
Harold Robbins
books.
And you don't think that's drivel?
No, I don't. I think that's great.
That's great writing.
That taught me a lot more about life than Karl Marx or Jung.
Well, how do you know? Because you haven't read it.
I have. I've read the reviews of these books. They're drivel.
But reading reviews is not the same as reading the book.
Listen, you won't believe this, but I've tried to read a philosophy book. Yeah, the first 3 pages, it's drivel.
Well, why don't you like it, though?
It's drivel.
Doesn't it stimulate your brain follicles?
No.
Doesn't it make you think?
These people are off their rocker.
So you'd rather read about some woman, getting a lift in a Bentley and suddenly turning into some house in Beverly Hills and some ridiculously inane plot emerging from that?
I read a load of Harold Robbins books when I was 19, and I decided I must aspire to the lifestyle of the people represented in Harold Robbins' books.
Well, maybe that's been your problem over the years.
No, it hasn't been my problem.
Well, how's it gone?
That's been my drive.
Well, how has that gone then?
It's gone pretty well.
Well, you haven't really ended up like a character in a Harold Robbins book, have you?
Why not?
You live in Gosport.
Hang on, excuse me. Didn't I used to pace up and down...
Not Beverly Hills, is it?
Didn't I used to pace up and down Park Avenue, spraying money around?
Well, I don't know.
Buying jewellery at, what's the name is?
Tiffany's,
that's
you?
Right. Of course I did.
Did you buy the jewellery for?
All that kind of stuff. I bought it for it was actually when my niece was born, and I went in there and I got her a pure silver barbell.
Did you?
You know a barbell?
Yes.
You know what a barbell is?
Yeah, my daughter got one of those as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Did you buy her one as well?
I think I probably did, actually.
Yeah, was that your stock in trade?
I think it was.
Solid silver barbells.
But I mean, what I'm saying is
$35.
When I read books like that about high achievers, great achievers, people who succeed in life,
they're works of fiction.
Yeah, but well, philosophy's a work of fiction.
No, it's not.
Philosophy's only what some, highfalutin, I'm the brain of the world type guy is trying to tell you should be doing with your life. It's rubbish.
Well, it's meant to be stimulating to your brain, though.
The greatest philosopher of all time, in my view, was Rasputin. Because he wasn't a philosopher. He was a con man. He was a con man. So he used to get maudlinly drunk, actually quite happily drunk, a lot of the time. He had sexual relations, not only with the Queen of Russia, but half of her retinue staff.
I don't think he ever pretended to be a philosopher, though, did he, Rasputin?
Oh, yeah, he did, yeah, because the reason he was allowed into the royal court in the first place was he would say things like, money is the devil, and the devil must be put down with a stake through his heart. Oh, this guy's a genius. Let this guy in.
Did he actually say that?
Something like that.
Right.
Get him to the banqueting table. Give us as much food and drink as he wants. You know, we've got to have this man around all the time to impress us with his dictums.
Well, I'm sorry that you're such a Philistine about these things.
I'm not a Philistine. Anybody who's been taken in by the sort of drivel that the so-called philosophers wrote are feeble-minded people.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, let me read you a few tweets that we've had in at the two mics, right?
Okay.
Massive respect to that, guys, but I'm sorry, Scrabble is not a sport, says Dave. And White says this.
Not a sport, is it?
Guest, you can play Scrabble as soon as you can spell a 3-letter word. And he says, well, that's Porky out then. It's very harsh, that, isn't it?
That is a bit harsh. Yeah.
And he also adds, I saw a guy spill his Scrabble set on the road. I asked him, what's the word on the street?
What's the word on the street? I quite like that. That's quite funny, yeah. Well
right.
done.
And Brian says, Porky's been way too nice to old MG lately. What is this witchcraft? What is it all about? Why are you being so nice to me?
No, it's not witchcraft at all. I mean, and it's not a question of being nice, kind of mutual respect type thing,
Is that
isn't
what it
it?
is?
You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
But, I mean, as I've asked you to quote to me one sentence from all the philosophers' books you've read, and you can't, that just proves it, doesn't it?
Well, it doesn't.
Because the case, it's all a load of drivel.
Well, no, it's not a question of remembering a single quote.
Who's your favourite philosopher, then?
Well, I just told you, probably Jean-Paul Sartre, I think. Because
Jean-Paul Sartre?
Yeah, because I
Was he
liked
French,
the way
was
that he wrote. He was French, yeah.
Yeah, what did he write about?
He wrote about relationships, he wrote about the world, he wrote about communism, he wrote about, France.
Well, you were very successful with the relationship bit of it, weren't you?
Well, I mean, maybe I learned a lot more from him than I realised.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Because almost all the relationships in his books always fail.
Yeah, well, most
Almost
of yours
all
have
of them.
done.
They have, yeah.
In your
Absolutely
life.
right.
Yeah.
Well, relationships tend to. I know you haven't had many, so you can't really speak with any great authority.
I've had loads, but I've never caused.
Yeah, but none that have lasted more than about 48 hours.
I've never caused the pain and damage in my way that you have.
No,
it's as simple as that.
So
you know
you
what
say.
I mean? Yes.
So you say.
Yes.
I'll tell you some more about the seat of learning, which is University College London.
Oh, really?
Coming up in a little
I can't
while.
wait.
Also, we're going to be talking about why restaurants have got so noisy.
Yep.
And we're doing listography a little bit later on as well. So if you want to hashtag listography and tweet them at the two mics, we will choose a subject coming up a little bit later on. We are the two mics. A couple more tweets for you. Rodney says this: would Porky class John Lennon as a philosopher?
Yes, would, yeah.
But you said philosophers were all con men.
No, I didn't. I said that all the philosophers that I've read books on, or I've read reviews of books on, all seem to me to be con men. But I would say John Lennon is a philosopher, yeah. I would. When he says things like, when he says things like, life's what happens when you're busy doing other things, I understand exactly what he's saying.
But that's what philosophers do.
Life smacks you in the face when you think you're looking after a bit of business or you're looking after a relationship, and then bang, suddenly hits you that something's gone wrong.
But that's what philosophers do. They make you think about something that they've said and apply it to your own life.
Yeah,
Tomo says this: Das Kapital on Amazon, £7.48.
Yeah.
Porky's book, 1 penny.
Yeah.
So I guess that means he's a more successful writer than
you. Well, how many copies of Das Kapital have been sold?
Probably quite a lot, I would imagine.
No, I mean, like in the last 12 months.
I don't know.
None.
I don't know.
Nobody buys Das Kapital these
People who are
days.
studying
People are still
Karl
buying
Marx.
My Rooney book.
Really? Well, they can get it for a penny, so it's not
And
surprising.
by the way, do you realise that My Rooney book will probably have a huge surge in sales in 9 games' time when Rooney becomes the most capped footballer in the history of English football?
Do you think you're going to write an addendum onto it? Maybe do a paperback version?
See what the,
Did you ever do a paperback version of it?
Of that one, no, we didn't. No.
Well, why don't you do one? Why don't you update it?
Well, I don't know. It depends if I got time.
I mean, if you got access to Rooney, you could update it. I mean, you didn't have to talk to him to do the rest of the chapters, did you?
No. It depends if the publishers have got
they're
still
going,
all
or
that kind of
they
stuff.
got under since then. No, Robbie says this: who's Porky trying to fool going on about books he's read or wants to read?
Yes,
Poldark is probably on his list.
No, not at all. I've never read Poldark, but I mean it's a great TV drama. And, for you to say, quite churlishly,
I just don't think it's very good.
A load of people staring into the distance and all that.
Yeah, well, there are.
I mean, hang on, this guy's been banged up in jail.
He's very wooden, this bloke.
He might be hanged in the next.
I don't care, though.
In the next episode.
I couldn't care less.
He's fighting for his life. The squirming, horrible, duplicitous individual who's a member of his family comes to do a deal with him and get him out of jail.
Yeah, but it doesn't interest me.
A man of honour, says, no, I'm not shaking your hand.
But it doesn't interest me, though.
You are deluded.
It does not grab me at all. I also watched over the weekend, had a bit of time, that show you were going on about, One of Us.
Oh, was
That's
it fantastic?
Absolute rubbish as well.
It's fantastic.
It's rubbish.
I thought you'd like that because it's in Scotland, it's your sort of home country.
Again, the Scottish scenery was very nice, but I mean, everyone in it, bar none, is a complete idiot.
Yeah.
A complete idiot.
No, it's brilliant.
Well, they kill this guy, right?
Well, somebody kills him. We don't know who's killed him.
Somebody's killed him.
Yeah.
Right, but
somebody's killed the killer.
They disguise the car, which is turned upside down.
Yes.
Which miraculously goes through a fence, but the police don't notice that the fence is actually busted, right?
Yes.
Despite the fact that they drive up and down
It's a
past
big
it
estate,
several
though.
times.
It's a big estate.
No, but they came on the same road.
Well, it was actually outside the front door. Actually, you're quite right.
They should have spotted that. Also, there's it's an upside down sort of Jeep, 4-wheel drive type
vehicle. They put a canvas over it,
covered with a tarpaulin.
Yeah, that's
which
right.
looks exactly like an upside down car covered with a tarpaulin.
Well, they put a few tires on it.
But they don't ask anything about what's that thing over there. And amazingly, despite the fact that this car has tumbled down the hill about 5 times, there doesn't appear to be any debris from the car actually anywhere for the police to pick it up.
Well, it was in a field, and soil is soft, grass is soft.
Yeah, but there would be bits
concrete.
of the car everywhere.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
I thought they were terrible. These
guys.
No,
I thought it was great. Anyway, listen, I've got to read you this one. This is Randy. He says, Porky says that if he bounces a tennis ball against a wall for 3 months or 3 years, there's a chance it'll go through it, but that philosophers talk drivel.
Yeah, well, is that true? You did say that, actually.
And that will happen. That would happen. If you sat in a chair next to a wall with a tennis ball and you spent... It would take a long time. It would take a very long time.
A few thousand years?
No, but it would take a few years.
Are you saying it would wear the wall away?
No, it wouldn't wear the wall away. What I'm saying is, at some stage, the protons and the electrons that make up the composition of that tennis ball...
Well, the atoms,
that's absolutely right, would merge absolutely perfectly with the protons and the electrons and the atoms of the wall, and the ball would pass through. But, it's a 1 in a million chance that the two things occur at the same time.
That's a bit like people saying if you had enough monkeys and enough typewriters, they would eventually produce Shakespeare.
Well, maybe they would.
Well,
I don't know. But, I mean, that's not the same analogy.
Well, it is. You're basically saying that something could eventually happen, even though scientifically it's not possible.
No, scientists know it could happen. Scientists know that if they invented a machine which kept pumping the same tennis ball against the wall over and over again, one morning they get up, and it might be in 27 years' time.
No, it wouldn't happen.
To find that tennis ball had gone through the wall.
No, because you could never change the atomic makeup of a ball.
No, you can't, and that's the very point. But the atomic makeup of the ball can mix with the atomic makeup of the wall, and it can move through it.
I don't think so.
No, it can. That's why.
But where'd you get this rubbish from?
Because I have studied scientific journals over the years, and that's the one thing that stuck in my mind. That could definitely happen.
Really?
Yeah, it could.
Okay.
Anyway, listen, look, there's a few more here, because I've got to read them out. People are good enough to send them to us.
There's a lot of listography suggestions coming in, actually.
What?
A lot of listography suggestions.
We've got to do that because it's later in the show, isn't it? Who's Porky trying to fool going on about books he's read or wants to read?
I just read that one out.
Oh, you did, sorry. Yeah. Right, there's one here. Look, it says, bring back logbooks, says Pete.
Logbooks?
Yeah, what does he mean by that? I don't know.
Does he mean car logbooks?
I don't know.
Well, logbooks used to be something you'd have when you had a car.
Yeah, that's right. You used to keep it in the glove compartment in case you
sold
stopped by the police.
And when you sold the car, you had to give the logbook out, which was presumably where you kept all the information about servicing, about what had been done to the car, any kind of accident that you might have had.
Yes, absolutely, and all of that.
So don't you still have that then?
No, because it's all now on a computer. So when I take the old Merc in to get it serviced, right, I always say, the documents are in a leather pouch in the boot. Yeah. And they said, OK, but they never look at them. And I said, why not?
Well, how do you know they're not tampering with your computer, though?
Well, it's because they always send me, like, a copy of whatever they've done afterwards.
Oh, right. Well, that's OK, then.
Yeah. But no, what I'm saying is, they know much more about my car than I do.
Because
when I drive into, like a Mercedes dealer, and I say, that's OK, let's have a look at your car. And they hit a computer, button, and they tell me everything about my car. Yeah. They know things about my car I don't even know.
Yeah, of course.
They know how deep the tread is.
Diagnostics.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they know how deep the tread is on the tyre.
Right.
They know.
And you can't take it anywhere to get that either, because you can take it to another garage that's not Mercedes approved.
That's right.
They can't get into the system.
No, I totally agree. They know how many times I've opened and closed the door.
Really?
Did you know that?
Really?
They know how many times the door's been opened and closed on that car.
How many times?
Well, I don't know, because I don't want to know. I didn't ask them.
How do you know they know that then?
Because they need to know that for wear and tear on the hinges on the door.
Did they say that to you?
Well, they said we know everything. They told me all these things.
We know how often you've opened the door?
Yeah.
And so you didn't ask them how many?
Why would I be interested?
Because that's the logical conclusion of the conversation. If somebody says, look, I know how many times you've opened your door, as a matter of interest, you would say how many.
No, I wouldn't. I couldn't.
You're not curious?
No, I'm not particularly curious. No, it's just that I.
How many times have you opened a passenger door? I bet that's a not very big number.
Yeah, quite. A lot of times. A lot of people want to, share the experience of driving in my car.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Well, it was open and closed a lot.
Maybe you could drive my car. There's quite a bit of that going on.
It was open and closed a lot when I was in it because we kept stopping, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we did actually. Yeah, to sort out various sort of machinations of the journey.
Now you've hardly left me enough time to tell you about what happened at the UCL do today.
You've told told me, and it sounded brilliant.
I haven't told
pleased.
I haven't told you about the outrageous politicisation of it, though, by the Dean, this woman who got up at the end and made this little speech after everybody had drifted off.
Oh, I love this.
And talked about how it was a wonderful place. It was open to people from all over the world. This is when they mentioned that Oxford and Cambridge was quite closed at the time, and how proud they were of the fact that that so many people from so many different countries came to UCL and all of this. Yeah. A lot of the names were foreign-sounding names. But then she launched into this sort of attack on Brexit. Completely out of the blue. Really? And said, I don't want to make this into a political speech, right?
But I will.
And then proceeded to make it into a political speech. Yeah. And said, we're very worried about the xenophobia which is currently sweeping the country. And I'm going,
what
xenophobia that's sweeping the country? Yeah. We're very worried. In fact, some of our colleagues here from Europe are feeling very, very put upon. They feel as if they're not welcome here anymore. Really? We must change this. And she started sort of tub-thumping about how terrible it all was that we had voted to leave the European Union.
I saw a report of the weekend saying hate crimes have now gone back to pre-Brexit levels.
Oh, well, there we are. Well, that's all right
ridiculous. Then. What? We didn't have hate crimes 2 years ago.
Nobody knew what hate crime was. No, exactly right. So, I mean... But I was absolutely staggered. I was almost going to heckle her at one point because people were clapping, saying how great it was that she was standing up for, the Europeans and that we were, in fact, all Europeans and that, these idiots that voted to get us out of the European Union were wrong.
If I went to Goodison Park and they were playing Liverpool, Liverpool beat us 2-1, and I turned to somebody and said, I hate Liverpool because it was the third time they beat us, would I be reported to the police?
It's very possible. It's very possible. It could indeed be a hate crime. It's very bizarre. I'll tell you some more about what this woman said coming up very, very shortly. We are the Two Mics. Good evening, I'm Mike Graham, he's Mike Parry, you're listening to the Two Mics. Coming up in this hour, we're going to talk about noisy restaurants. I've got some tips on Mr. Parry's property empire to give him as well. Also, it's Listography tonight. You tell us what 3 things you want us to describe. We've already got quite a few good suggestions, but just hashtag it Listography and then tweet it at the Two Mics. You're listening to the Two Mics with me, Mike Graham, and Mike Parry. Now, it did strike me when I was at this do earlier on today that quite a lot of the students there, because they were master's degree students, were all coming from quite wealthy families. And I saw a story that I thought would be of interest to you a little bit earlier on. Apparently, it's wealthy undergraduates who are now kind of eschewing the idea of going to stay in some kind of rented digs in this sort of, suburbs of London. Yeah. And instead, they're splashing out on plush rooms in various kind of, rather trendy parts of London. And they're paying as much as £1,700 a month.
Sorry, what do you mean, plush rooms?
Plush rooms in skyscrapers, like they're sharing flats with different other students, right? But instead of taking, like, some kind of hovel that they would live in, like sort of place you would rent to them, they're actually renting very expensive places such as this. I can show you this picture here. Pure student living flats, they're called. And they get, like, a common room. And then they rent
these are student blocks?
These are student blocks,
These are blocks of student flats for wealthy students?
But for wealthy students who are paying as much as $20,000 a year to live there.
No.
Yeah, in the centre of London.
$20,000 a year?
Yeah. So
I thought they had to borrow about like $9,000 a year just for fees.
These are for people whose parents are literally paying for them to live there.
Well, I can't say that I necessarily disapprove of that.
Well, no, you want to get in on it, don't you?
Well, I mean, that'd be a sea change in...
Here we go. The private rooms feature a small double bed, an ensuite bathroom, a kitchenette and dining area. And there's 7 different skyscrapers across London.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I am very well aware, because my family are involved in student property business down on the south coast, that over the years you would not believe the amount of tower blocks that have been built in places like Bournemouth, places like Southampton, places like Brighton, to accommodate students. And in the old days, I mean, for instance, while I went to the University of the Trent,
which was then Trent Polytechnic.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Well, it was.
Doesn't matter.
There's no shame in it being Trent Polytechnic.
No. 3 of us lived in what you would call digs. Yeah. So what happens is...
So you've got a landlady and you have a room.
Yeah, there's this big house, right, in Harlaxton Drive in Nottingham, right, in a place called The Park, just on the other side of the castle. And the 3 of us all turn up on day 1 and were allocated these digs, and you didn't argue, you just went there. And we each got a separate room. Right. But it was in a huge house, and what had happened was the lady...
And would she cook breakfast for you as well?
Oh, everything. I'm just trying to remember her name now.
Well, you don't have to give her name away. She might not be with us anymore.
Oh, no. Oh, she's definitely not with us. She was about like 65, 70 then. Uh-huh. And a very, very, good lady, strong lady. And Mrs. Steele, I think her name was. I think her name was Mrs. Steele. Mrs. Steele. Anyway, the point of the story is, you got room each. I think it was £5 a week and all that. And you got your breakfast. And if you wanted it, you got dinner in the evening. Of course, we never turned up for dinner in the evening, so we'd always...
What, would she make it and then you didn't show up?
No, it wasn't that. You had to ring her before midday
from
the phone in the, in
the payphone.
The payphone, and say, we're in or we're not in, or something like that, you know. And if she made it and you didn't turn up, you got fined.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
So she ran a hard sort of system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But that was it. And then... After a bit of that, we thought this is not really the freedom of the world we wanted.
But that was also the time when you would have got a grant, presumably, from the government to go and buy your books, and you would have had sort of subsistence money.
Definitely. I spent that in the first 2 weeks.
On beer?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Beer and like, womanising and all that kind of stuff, because that was the problem of being in digs. It was difficult smuggling women back in.
Oh, she wouldn't allow that?
Well, she sort of, she sort of turned a blind eye to it, but you still didn't sort of want some old pensioner woman, just down the corridor when you were, well, I mean, that's what she was.
Right.
When you were...
So is that the only place you stayed, or did you move around?
No. After Christmas, we went and got a flat in West Bridgeford, which is near the cricket ground.
Because the first year I was at university, I lived on the campus because they had a sort of relatively modern campus, so there was student accommodation there.
Yes.
Where you would have a shared kitchen, but you would have basically a room.
Sure. Yes. No. I understand what you're saying. By the way, I'm going to bring together two aspects of your story about this morning, what you're doing, okay?
All right.
One, champagne you had after the ceremony.
We did have some champagne, yeah.
And then also you said that the Dean or whatever started, waxing political on Brexit.
Yeah.
Did you know that because of the Brexit decision, that Pol Roger, they're one of the most famous champagne companies in the world, Pol Roger, are, for British only, going to start producing champagne in pint bottles.
Pint bottles?
Pint bottles.
Why?
Because Churchill used to drink it in pint bottles, and it was produced in pint bottles for many years after the war, and then suddenly, when the influence of sort of...
So is a pint bottle smaller than a normal 75 centilitre bottle, then?
Well...
I would imagine so, right?
Well, half a litre is... just under a pint, isn't it?
Is it?
Yes, it is, just under a pint.
Well, I'm just trying to imagine pouring out a normal bottle of wine into a pint glass.
Yes.
There'd probably be more in the bottle than there would be in the glass.
Yes, there would, yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah, okay. But anyway, going to produce them in pint bottles. It's going to be a new measure.
So it'll be a bit cheaper then?
It'll be a bit cheaper, and that's precisely it. Hitler used to say that half a bottle of champagne was never good enough to wake him up in the morning, but a full bottle of champagne was too much. So the Pol Roger people made in pint bottles.
Yes, that's probably true actually, because if you drink a whole bottle of champagne on your own, it's a bit too much.
It is, absolutely.
But half a bottle isn't enough.
Yes, exactly.
That's certainly one of those splits that you get on a plane is not enough.
No, exactly, that's right.
You can also get a 15-litre Nebuchadnezzar. The equivalent of 15 normal-sized 75 centilitre bottles.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Well, you picked that one.
I once had one of those, I think, at some party or other. Somebody opened
that big?
Somebody opened one, and because there were so many people there, and it was a sort of special occasion.
Yes, well, I'm not sure about that one. Talking about drinking, by the way, right now, there's something Jeremy Corbyn and I actually agree on.
Is there?
Yes.
Are you not becoming a Corbynite after all this time?
I'm not becoming a Corbynite, but
how long is that thing going on for, by the way?
What?
Corbyn and Owen Smith.
What, the election?
The so-called leadership election.
I've no idea.
I mean, why is it still going on? Corbyn is going to win it by a landslide, right?
Yeah. Well, I
they're having a debate, I think, on Sky coming up in the next week or so. So it must be coming to an end, the next couple of weeks?
I've no idea. I really can't.
24th of September, I'm told.
I really can't say. But
by our man with the knowledge behind the glass.
What I can tell you is that if all the candidates hadn't stepped down in the race to be the Tory leader, that would still be going on.
Yeah, I suppose so.
And we wouldn't have a government because that was due to be voted on.
We did all right without a government, didn't we? When Cameron stepped down and we didn't have a government, things were fine.
I suppose so. Now then,
what do you and Jezza get on with then?
Well, he made, he's made a lot of speeches recently, and a lot of them have been very controversial, all that kind of stuff. But one thing he did speak out about was what he called an end to the early evening socialisation, which benefits men who don't feel the need to be at home and is completely biased against women.
Yeah, I thought it was rubbish when he came out with
it.
No, why do you agree with him?
He's going on about the culture of after-work drinks, criticised by Jeremy Corbyn, who suggests that they discriminate against mothers who want to get home to their children.
Well, what about fathers who want to get home to their children?
Well, yeah, but fathers are more reluctant to shoot off home to their children.
I don't think that's true.
Well, no.
Not in this day and age.
You are talking absolute garbage.
No, I'm not. I'm talking from the point of view of a father.
For years and years.
Which I am, and which you're not.
And for years and years and years, the drinks after work was a routine part of your life.
It was, but there was no shortage of women there and men. There was no differentiation.
Well, I agree when you're a younger age in our profession, that kind of stuff. But you see, I've always felt very sorry for women in the pub culture in this country.
Why?
Because Well, because, for instance, when I was a young reporter, as you were a young reporter, right? Now, when I remember being on the Birmingham Mail, I had quite a big patch in Worcestershire and Warwickshire. And you go off to... I remember once I went to do some story about a bakery strike, which had turned violent. No, seriously.
A violent bakery strike.
Yeah, a violent bakery strike.
Tremendous.
So, somebody had been throwing themselves in front of the bakery vans and all this, your scabs and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, great,
shut down the bakery.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was, yeah. And so we got the alert early, about 6 a.m.
You didn't have to go undercover at the bakery, did you?
Yeah, I had to shoot down to the old bakery. It was in a place called Tewkesbury, which was just on the edge.
Oh, I know Tewkesbury,
Just on the edge of the Midlands patch,
yes.
And I had to get down there. And I remember it gets again. Anyway, I had a great first story by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or something like that, and filed it and all that kind of stuff. So then what happens is, because in those days, of course, the only way you could get a story back to your office was to pick up a telephone and dictate it to a copy taker at the other end, who would type it out on bits of paper, which would then go to the news desk, right?
Right.
So then when it arrived at the news desk, you had to call back, 10 minutes later, make sure the news desk had got it, and the news editor had read it, and he said, great, this is good stuff, but the story's going to develop. He says, go off and get yourself a couple of pints and ring me back in 3/4 of an hour.
Right.
Now, you could do that as a young man.
Yeah.
But young women couldn't. Young women would never go into pubs on their own.
Yeah, but that was a long time ago, though. Well, that's not the case now.
I think it is still the case. How many times, if you're on your way home and you decide to drop into a cocktail bar,
I don't do very much of that, though.
Well, we all do occasionally, I don't know, you might be meeting somebody, and so you get in the pub first, and somebody comes along 5 or 10 minutes later, right? How many times do you ever see a woman sitting on her own in a pub, enjoying a drink, and maybe reading a magazine or something like that? Very rarely. Women still feel that it's I don't know. It's
maybe it depends.
Feminine.
Maybe it depends on the pub you're talking about.
Yeah, but I'm talking. I said a cocktail bar. I didn't say a pub.
Yeah.
Maybe women feel it's
No,
not
I think
feminine.
you're completely off the pace on this.
No. They feel they're under social pressure not to do that. And I was quite enamoured the other day when I was in a pub, sir, and I can't remember what I was doing. I was waiting for somebody or something. And a woman came in and very boldly said, "Oh, hello, yes, could I have a large glass of Pinot Grigio, please? I'm sitting over there. Could you bring it over?" And she was totally confident about it.
Yeah, but why would that be anything other than a normal to you?
That is
to me,
very
that's completely
rare.
normal.
No, it's very rare in this country.
True.
It is very rare, honestly.
No, I think you're just living in that sort of, part of the suburban world where perhaps it doesn't happen very much.
All my life.
in London all the time.
Well, you say that, but I mean, my one of my sisters, both of my sisters actually, have worked in jobs at, very high professional levels, and yet whenever I've met them in a situation in London or something like that, they would always wait outside the pub for me. They would never go in and sit down on their own.
Perhaps they share your rather old-fashioned view of the world, though.
No. It's just something that was never done. I don't know if it's a northern thing or whatever. I'm not sure.
Well, we'll have to ask people.
But I do.
We're going to get them to tweet us at the two mics and tell us. I just think it's an old-fashioned thing that you just haven't caught up with. And Corbyn, for saying that, has actually made it sound as if it's something that goes on all the time, that somehow women are the ones that rush off home to look after their children, and the men don't.
Well,
which is also wrong.
No, I'm not saying that, but you know as well as I do, Mike, the years we spent in Fleet Street, how many blokes who were fathers of children ever said, "Oh no, fellas, I can't join in the pub for I want to get home and bath the children." Yeah. You never heard anybody say that.
Not very often.
Never, ever.
Occasionally you would, and I think now probably it's more the case. I mean, I think when you and I were working in Fleet Street, many of the women who worked there had kids. And if they did have kids, then they'd have somebody looking after them, and they wouldn't stay around as long. Yes. However, most of the men who, if they had kids, generally speaking, their wives would not be working.
Exactly.
So they'd be looking after the kids at home.
That's what I mean. So it was a completely unfair balance.
But I don't think it's like that now, though.
And by the way, we've worked with a lot of very good, very professional women, journalists, all sorts of other professions they've been in. And you know for a fact as well that the woman, without a shadow of a doubt, bears the stress, the pressure, the responsibility of the childminder. Because if anything goes wrong, the childminder immediately rings the wife. She doesn't ring the father. She doesn't, the mother. She doesn't ring the father.
Generally speaking, yeah.
And the number of times, I remember at the Express, I remember one particular executive there came in one morning. She was there for 10 minutes and she got a phone call. Weren't mobile phones in those days, something in her office. Oh no, the childminder had gone sick or something. She had to dash off home. Yeah. She had to give up a day's work and go off home. Women have always been under that extra pressure, and I always think it's been rather unfair. Yeah,
well, I still think Corbyn's wrong, and I think you're wrong to have agreed with him. Yeah. How about this from George? I'm trying to imagine pouring wine into a pint glass. He goes, "Oh yeah, trying to imagine." And then he says, #done it 1,000 times. Yes. Why would he say that? I don't think I've ever tried to pour a whole glass of a whole bottle of wine into a glass.
No.
And this one from Robert, who says on your tennis story,
yes.
The rubber compound of the tennis ball would erode long before 27 years pass by, and it passes through a wall. So there you are.
Well, you say that, but I mean, the thing is, it's like waiting for a heart transplant. Okay.
You had to wait for one.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you didn't need one.
The answer to the problem could come within one day if you got the mixture right between the electrodes and the protons and the atoms and all that kind of stuff. Or it could be 1 century. That's the very point.
Yeah.
So whilst I accept that in the long term that might be the eventual outcome, that the rubber compound would wear away, who knows that it wouldn't happen the first time you threw the ball at the wall.
Very possibly. But we're running out of time again, as ever, because we've got a guest coming up next. We're going to talk to Paul Breckle, Chief Executive Action on Hearing Loss, is the man that's coming on. He's going to tell us about why restaurants got so noisy lately.
Excellent.
And people are actually going deaf. It's not normally this quiet in here, especially when Porky's here, ranting on about one thing or another. But we're going to speak to a man now who's very concerned about the noise levels in restaurants. He is Paul Breckle, Chief Executive from Action on Hearing Loss, because apparently restaurants, generally speaking, have now got a much larger and bigger decibel level than they've ever had.
They're getting louder and louder. You know, Rules that you and I have been to occasionally.
Yeah, I haven't been there for many years.
And that's in Covent Garden in London.
It is.
And it's very lavish. It's got curtains.
Yeah.
It's got very padded seats, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's got Regency chic.
Regency chic. Yeah, it's got thick carpets. It's got fantastic tablecloths and all that. And you know, you feel in there that it's a sort of normal sound level. But what's happening now is that, you know, the Terence Conran type places, which are minimalist, have just got wooden tables. They've got no carpet on the floors. They haven't got any curtains. Yeah. There's a lot of, like tinny type accessories, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Noise levels are getting greater and greater, and people are suffering.
Well, let's talk to Paul about this and see what he plans to do about it. Paul, very good evening to you.
Good evening, Mike and Mike.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I mean, I suppose it's one of those things you don't often notice, do you? But we were talking about this a couple of hours ago, and you tend to now notice quiet restaurants more than you notice noisy ones.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what we've seen is a real change in, for example, interior design trends. So, as you were just saying, there's many more hard surfaces, high ceilings, etc. So it's even more important that restaurants think about the acoustics and think about keeping restaurants quiet so people can enjoy the social spaces that they are as much as they are eating spaces.
But are we not more used to just generally more noise as well? Because, I mean, certainly if you live in London or any major city, the noise levels, I would say, have been rising for years, haven't they?
Well, they have, but I mean, if you think about it from the point of view of the 1 in 6 Londoners who've got some degree of hearing loss, so well over 1 million people, background noise in a restaurant can really spoil somebody's night, and that's what we found out in the report. So we surveyed 1,500 people across the UK, and 8 out of 10 said that they'd had a difficulty holding a conversation because of high levels of background noise in restaurants, and 9 out of 10 said they wouldn't make a return visit to a place because noise levels were so high. So it certainly is a real problem for people with hearing loss, which, like I say, is 1 in 6 of us. But more broadly, we've had lots of feedback to the campaign that we've been putting together, that actually people, whether they've got a hearing loss or not, are finding restaurants, cafes and pubs far too noisy.
OK, so, Paul, what are you intending to do about this then? I mean, are you actually trying to draw to the attention of society that people are losing their hearing by going into restaurants that are too noisy? And if that's the case, do you not then have the responsibility to draw this to the medical authorities and say, this is pollution of a dangerous level?
Well, we certainly do that when noise levels are extremely high. So, for example, we've had campaigns around noises in clubs and pubs with live music to think about that. But that's not so much the issue in restaurants. It really is much more about giving people with hearing loss and others too a choice in terms of quieter spaces. So we're trying to encourage restaurants to do things like turning down music or having speaker-free zones. We're not against there being some atmosphere, but it's about giving people choice. As you've touched on, using really good interior design, thinking about soft furnishings, or maybe something as simple as having rubber cap chair legs, promoting quiet areas, and also giving people information so that when they book, they know whether it's a noisier or a quieter restaurant. It's about the restaurants taking control of the situation.
And I'm going to ask you in a minute about how they're responding to that. But do you also suspect in some of the chain restaurants, for example, they don't actually want people hanging around too long? You know, they don't want you to be there for more than, say, an hour because they want to kick you out and bring in somebody new. And maybe that's why they're so noisy.
Well, that might be right, but I mean, what we've, like I say, with what we were finding, with 9 out of 10 people saying that they wouldn't make a return visit to a place that's too noisy. I mean, one of the things we're drawing to attention to, even those restaurants that want fast footfall, is that actually it's a false economy to be doing that, and that what they want to do is to make their restaurants or their chains welcoming environments, so people who've got hearing loss or people who just want a quieter experience can really enjoy the food and enjoy the atmosphere of the restaurant or the cafe.
Yeah, Paul, can I state what I think is a definition of the absolute obvious, and that is that there are some restaurants which are deliberately designed to be noisy. Take some, great trendy place in London called the Chiltern Firehouse or something like that. You go in there and there's a cacophony of noise which is hitting you in the ears all the time, because actually people see that as exciting and noisy and it's trendy and all that. And then I mentioned a restaurant called Rules, which is a very traditional restaurant in Covent Garden, which is completely the opposite. That is quiet, where people whisper across the table, an older clientele and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what I'm saying is, doesn't the individual know whether they want to head for and are going into a noisy establishment or a quiet establishment?
Well, that might be right, but even in a noisier establishment, there are things that a restaurant can do. So, for example, there's some really good contemporary acoustic treatments which absorb some of that sound or diffuse it, so wall ceiling panels and things like that. So you can still have that sort of trendy urban restaurant with stripped-back furnishings, but think a little bit about reducing the unnecessary noise to still create the buzz. Because, of course, while people might make choices about noisier or quieter restaurants, I mean, for example, a large number of staff that work for us, 12% of them have got a hearing loss. Some of those are younger people, young Londoners, 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. They want to be able to go out with their mates, and that might be to a restaurant that is much more contemporary.
Sure.
And there's an access issue there as well, and an equality issue.
Is it possible that some of these people suffering hearing loss are getting it from elsewhere, though? Like, they might have, go to a noisy restaurant, but then after that, they go to an even noisier club. And we've all walked into these places where you can't hear anything.
That's right. I mean, the causes of hearing loss are widespread. So we're not saying that the noise in restaurants is causing hearing loss, but what we are saying is for the one in 6 people who've got some degree of hearing loss, that actually those restaurants are really excluding them, because if you've got a hearing loss, even if you've got, for example, hearing aids, background noise makes it really, really tough. And there's also a whole variety of things restaurants can do, even if the environment is noisy. Think about the lighting, so that people can lip read if they're relying a bit on their lip reading. Make sure that waiters and waitresses, face the person when they're taking an order. I mean, I know that might sound like a common courtesy, but the amount of people that we've heard have had incorrect orders because there's been a mix-up because of background noise. So just some of those simple tips to be sort of hearing loss aware and to provide really good customer service.
Are any of these restaurants actually listening to you at the moment?
Well, we've had some independent restaurants in London and elsewhere that have paid attention, but I've written to the 70 biggest chains in the country and as yet have not had any responses, which is why we've been ramping up the campaign.
Right.
And we're thinking of developing, or we're looking for funding to develop a mobile phone app to allow diners to record decibel levels and feed that data back in so we can identify good examples as well as the worst offenders. So we think more needs to be done just to bring this to restaurateurs' attention.
Okay, and isn't it part of modern life that, Paul, that people are putting their hearing at risk in other areas? For instance, young people walking around with headphones clamped to their ears all the time, listening to music. People on
occasionally our podcast.
And occasionally our podcasts, but our podcasts are actually very, very good listening. They're not loud and noisy. They don't burst people's eardrums. But also, if people are whispering into their mobile phones all the time, do they actually know what the human voice is supposed to sound like at what decibel level these days?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we do is to really try and encourage people, so, for example, to make sure they're safe listening in relation to their MP3 players or their other devices. So take some breaks when you're listening, gives your ears a rest. If you hear a ringing in your ears, for example, because you've been been listening to music on your MP3 player or because you've been to a club, then that's actually damage to the hair cells in your cochlea. So we'd encourage people just to sort of listen safe and make sure they can enjoy music and indeed your podcast and everything else like that for years to come.
Yeah, sure.
Mind you, I must say, one of the things that annoys me an awful lot now is on my, the iPhone headphones that you now get, because of some European ruling, I believe, you'll be able to tell me this is right, Paul, you can only turn them up a certain level now. You can't go above a certain level.
Well, that's right. I mean, you can actually override that. I mean, it comes with the preset noise limit.
You can, but even overriding it still makes it not as loud as it used to be.
Well, we think that's a good thing. I mean, we think that's a way of maybe just nudging people to look after their hearing so that they can, still enjoy music and sort of enjoy the attenuation and the extra volume, but without damaging their hearing.
Fair enough. Well, good luck with the campaign. I think there will always be some noisy restaurants around, Paul, but I guess we can all avoid them if necessary. Paul Brickell there, Chief Executive from Action on Hearing Loss. How about this from Dan, who's responding to what you were saying earlier about women in pubs. He says, girls my age, 26-ish, all refuse to go into a pub alone to wait for me or have a lonely drink. It's awkward and it's ridiculous, but it's true.
Yeah, it is true.
I'm amazed. I'm staggered by that.
Honestly, it is a social norm for a young lady, unless she's very, very self-confident and she has the vibrancy to, stand on her own 2 feet, that kind of stuff. Women are very reluctant to go into what is, generally speaking, a highly dominant male environment.
Well, maybe you're right. White says this makes me giggle to see established married couples who go to restaurants but have nothing to say to each other. But the new one now, though, is sitting there, but they're both on their phones.
That's right, yeah, don't say anything to each other.
Not talking to each other
But in the old days, you're absolutely right. You knew a couple were married because they used to stare at their food and put it in their mouth and never, ever exchange a word between them.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing.
It is very, very awkward indeed. Now, we got lots more coming up. We've got listography to choose. Maybe we should choose that coming up next because we'll do that in the last hour of the show. And also, a little bit later on, we're going to talk about private number plates because you've got a few private number plates, but you don't actually put them on your car.
I don't.
So you can tell us that story as well.
Indeed.
We are the Two Mics.
Madness, they call it madness. Madness, they call it madness.
We are the Two Mics. We've got lots more coming up. Of course, we'll have a Porky quiz on Thursday, as we did last week. We'll have Ask Porky tomorrow.
Yes, we will.
And a bit of Porky Vision on Wednesday.
Yeah, Porky Vision, by the way. I want to tell you a story about a Porky Vision thing, which won't be included in Porky Vision. But I've never seen the X Factor, right?
Right. Well, never ever.
Never ever. But
how can you have missed the X Factor?
Well, I just don't know.
You must have just, even by accident, come upon it once in a while.
Well, I came upon it by accident last night because it came up before Poldark, right? So what I'm saying is it's actually just introducing singers, isn't it? Whereas Britain's Got Talent is all sorts of different acts, isn't it?
That's right.
But X Factor is just singers, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So I couldn't believe this because you got Simon Cowell and then you got that beautiful woman, Nicole Scherzinger.
Yeah.
Used to be Lewis Hamilton's girlfriend.
Yeah.
And then you've got.
Mind you, I think it's just singers. I don't think they do dance acts.
No,
do they?
It's just singers.
Some of the singers dance as well.
Oh, do they? Okay. And then you've got the Irish chap who's been around for 10 years or something.
Mr. Walsh.
Is that Louis Walsh?
Louis Walsh.
Yeah. And then
he went away for a while and then he's come back.
And then Ozzy Osbourne's wife is involved, isn't she? Yeah, right.
Yeah, Sharon.
So. But
who's also been away and come back.
Is she? Okay.
Yeah.
So I have never seen this program before.
Right.
So I assumed that the singers come on and they.
And it's the start of the new show, isn't it? So this will be.
Is that the first? Was that the first one?
I'm not certain, but I think it might be.
Yeah, well,
so basically, they have lots of people who are not very good at this point.
Well, these are rehearsals, are they, or something?
Yeah.
It might be
generally speaking.
Yeah, this could be like the interviews or the rehearsals or something. But anyway, so this lady comes on, and I thought they'd say, what's your history of singing, or what have you done before, or whatever you're going to do. So anyway, the first question is, how old are you? And the lady said, I'm 34. I said, okay, and why are you on the show tonight? I shouldn't be laughing, but I didn't realise that this is the sort of show it was. This lady then says, well, I was in a very abusive relationship.
Right.
Oh, really? Tell us more about that. Well, and this lady's 34,
right.
So it's not like she's 17
and
or 18.
And they now develop all those stories because it's become more important than the actual singing.
I'm not joking, Mike. By the time this lady had finished, everybody was in tears.
Right.
And I don't mean the judges.
Yeah.
I mean the audience, and flashing the audience.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then,
well, that's what the show's now become.
Well, hang on. So then, and she says, this sort of 7 minutes sort of soliloquy about this abusive relationship I've been in and all this, Yeah. And I thought the only way out was to sing.
Right.
And then one of the judges says, "Go for it, honey," or something like this, or you sing your heart out.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or something like,
And it's all so spontaneous, isn't it?
It's right. Yeah,
That's the thing I like
sing
about
your
it.
heart out. So then she sings, and look, I'm not a great judge of voices, but I mean, she didn't sound like Barbara Streisand,
right?
But she didn't sound like a cat wailer. You know what I mean? I mean, it was okay.
It was all right. So she'll probably get through then.
Well,
but you know how sometimes in the past they'll have these stories which have been very... And I'm not suggesting for a moment that they've been massaged in any way by the producers, but they do sometimes find themselves getting slightly tripped up somewhere down the road when they start to become bigger and bigger and more famous, and suddenly a newspaper starts to look into the actual story.
No, I didn't leave her. She left me.
Actually, that wasn't quite what happened.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so then everybody's in tears, like whole audience, room, judges, all this kind of... And she finishes, and then, people... And then you've got this very solemn...
But that's what the show is now.
No, you've got this very solemn judging panel, For me, it's a yes. Oh, hooray! Yeah. It's going to be 4 yeses.
Right.
Because we've already gone through this huge emotional story of this woman. And then the next judge says, "What can I do but say that I'm so proud of you."
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then finally Simon Cowell gets the last one. Do you think he's going to say after all of
that?
But
also then they try and tease it up that he's going to be the one that's going to say no.
Well,
and of course he doesn't.
No,
he says yes anyway.
He says it's a yes.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden...
I can't believe I only just discovered this, though.
Honest to God, it's the first time I've ever seen it.
Because they've been doing this for... I mean, I used to watch it as it got towards the end, because when it started, I think I was still in newspapers. That's how long ago it was.
Right,
and you used to have to kind of know what was going on.
Yeah, exactly.
So I used to watch it. But it's become so hackneyed now.
I couldn't believe
that
it.
it's not any longer just about singing.
It's
now about the kind of the backstory, as they now call it,
Yeah.
which I hate, by the way. I hate that phrase, the backstory.
Yeah,
but everybody's now got a backstory.
But I thought, hang on, this is almost like a social workers' convention. You know what I mean?
But that's what it is now. That's what it is. Because
Anyway.
they're creating not just a singer, they're creating sort of a character.
Yeah, exactly.
So that people will follow them, they'll vote for them and all that.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, talking about singing, Alex has tweeted in tonight and said, hope you have or will discuss Freddie Mercury and his music, as it would have been his 70th birthday today, which is true.
Well,
September the 5th.
If that's the case...
So we should have a little blast of Freddie, shouldn't we, at some point?
We definitely will during the show, because I would normally have known about that, because, of course, musical heroes...
Normally you keep astride of all of these things.
I normally do, and so I'm sorry I missed that one, because I think Freddie Mercury was probably the most talented sort of musician that has ever happened in my lifetime. In the sense that it seems to me he wrote most of the Queen's records, he produced a lot of them, he could play almost any instrument that he sat down,
he was a very
piano
talented guy,
guitar, and incredibly talented.
And funny enough, he was in the news only last week, wasn't he? Because he got a plaque.
He got a plaque
on
at
his childhood
the home where he grew up.
Yeah.
But I mean, for instance, do you remember the late Kenny Everett?
Yes.
And Kenny Everett and Freddie Mercury struck a bond from early on. I think the first time he appeared on Top of the Pops, Kenny Everett was doing it, and they were singing the Seven Seas of Rye.
Yeah.
And they got talking afterwards and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, a couple of years later, Freddie Mercury rings up Kenny Everett and says, "Look, I've been in the studio all day and I've put this thing together, but I'm not sure if it's any good. And I need somebody to listen to it for me. Can I come round?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "I've got on a little machine." He went round and it was the most
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes, it was the most famous song ever.
Yeah.
And Everett was just bowled over and said, "This is brilliant, Freddie."
Yeah.
And Freddie said, "I'm not sure if it is. It's all over the place,
It's
isn't
really
it?"
long and all the rest of it. Yeah.
And then did it. And then I also remember now a record you and I may remember from the Queen era was Radio Gaga.
Radio Gaga, yes.
Yeah, because we work in radio, and so it's always struck a chord. Well, that was written by. Was the drummer John Deacon?
I think so.
Yes, okay, yeah. Well, that was written by him, a fair-haired chap.
Yeah.
Right, okay. But what he said, what happens is, if you're in Queen and you write a record, he said, because Brian May did, but Brian may not be included in this, but John Deacon, he said, I wrote a Radio Gaga, he said, it took me about 2 weeks. He said, when I got to actually recognising it as a record, what you do then is, you go and see Freddie,
right,
and you give to him the raw product, And then
he turns it into something else.
Exactly, exactly. And you know, he puts all the spin on it.
Well, they did that at Live Aid, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, yeah.
Which is a very famous performance of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Well, we'll have a bit of Freddie Mercury a little bit later on.
Indeed.
Tomo says this Porky's tennis ball thing is known as quantum tunnelling. Not exactly as he explains it, though. See Professor Jim Al-Kilali.
Okay.
So maybe we should get him on.
Yeah, maybe.
And White says about that guy who was on about the noisy restaurants, I bet this guy gives out really safe Christmas presents, which I think I know what he means by that.
Really safe.
I must admit, I'm not as bothered by the noisy restaurant problem as you are.
Maybe as you move into early middle age, you think to yourself, you know, could you please all just be
Well, do you remember, funny enough, I was going to say to him, but we were we went for a drink after one of the shows last week.
Yes.
And we were in a bar, not far from here, which was completely empty, apart from a couple of people behind the bar.
That's right.
But they were playing some quite loud music.
They were.
And you said to me, do you think we should ask them to turn it down?
Yeah.
And I was reluctant to do it, only because, you know, they're working there, right?
Yeah.
And it's their kind of environment. And if you come in as the only customers,
that's right.
Sure, you've got the right to say it.
Yeah.
But I said, why don't we just go outside?
We did. It was a nice evening. We went outside, and it was quite
because
pleasant.
you feel kind of, you feel a bit awkward in that situation, which is not normally something that bothers me, right?
All right. But what about when we were up in Edinburgh, at the Edinburgh Festival?
Yeah.
You know, very successful.
Very successful.
Putting the video together.
Just about recovered, actually.
Yeah, just about recovered, yeah. But if you remember, because we were like artistes, if you see what I mean, we were allowed to go to the bar.
Yeah.
Which is a very, very nice bar.
It was a nice bar.
And very well stocked bar.
And didn't seem to ever close.
Didn't seem to ever close. Certainly wasn't closed at 5 o'clock when we left there one morning. But anyway, if you remember the main room, right, it was very, very noisy. Do you remember?
Was, yeah.
The main bar in the main room.
It was.
So,
but then there was a room further back.
Well, this is what I was about to say. So I went and talked to the guy on the door, and I said, "Look, you know, we're two mics." And I was saying, he said, you're in the VIP area, but this is the VVIP area. And I said, well, he said, yes, you can. So we went into that one, and that was much quieter, wasn't it?
And that was very quiet.
And it was a more pleasant experience.
It was, but I mean, obviously the people who were in the noisier bar, you would have to say were probably younger than us.
And probably wanted to be there. Yeah. That's fair enough, no problem at all.
And I don't think you want to make everywhere quiet so that you can't actually go to a noisy bar.
I said to...
And how can you have a quiet nightclub?
No, you can't have a quiet nightclub. I totally agree. And I said to Paul, didn't I, the Chief Executive of Action here and Lot, I said, look, isn't it simple? Don't people who want a quiet restaurant go to what's renowned a quiet restaurant?
Yeah.
People who want a quiet pub go to a quiet pub. And those who don't go to... I mean, crikey. I mean, the discos I used to go to, and between the age of about sort of, 17 and 21... Right. You couldn't speak to a girl in the club unless you went right to the edges of round the back of the bar or something. If you're trying to tell her something. I remember going to a Uriah Heep concert at Hammersmith Odeon, and I was right down the front. It was so noisy that literally, I mean, you'd come out of these shows and your ears would be ringing. Well, I mean, you would hear like all the way home, and it wasn't until usually the next day. Yeah. And I remember going to I can't remember if it was a Deep Purple show or something like that, and there was a guy actually asleep against one of the speakers. Wow.
He was out off his head, obviously.
Well, he won't have any brain left.
Well, he might not be hearing either.
But loads of rock stars from those days, like Pete Townsend, all these people, they complain now that they've got serious hearing.
Townsend has got deaf.
Yeah, serious hearing problems because they spent so long standing in front of these massive speakers which are belting out their music.
But I actually object to the fact that I now can't put music on that's loud enough for me to enjoy it. Because, the Euro rules are such that you can now only raise the volume on your headphones.
This is on a device.
Yeah.
You can at home. You can do as much as you want.
Well, you can play it as loud through the speakers as you like.
Yeah,
and also if you've got your own headphones. But if you've got a phone and you're listening to music, which I sometimes do on the tube or something, you can't listen to it loud enough to hear it. Because it doesn't close out I mean, I know I could get different headphones and all that, but I just find that... if I want to blast my hearing, I think I should be able to.
Yeah, well, it may be, but maybe it's for your own good.
Well, it might be, but I don't really like being told what to do.
No. Well,
by the way, when we were talking about logbooks earlier, Pete reminds us. He says you're talking about mathematical logarithmic books.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
like before calculators.
Yeah. Well, funny enough,
logarithms. I never really understood the point of those.
No, I never did. When I was a student of urban estate management.
Urban estate management?
Yes. What
did you actually learn when you were a student of urban estate management?
Well, I learned how to build a house.
How to build a house?
How to build a house, yeah.
What, you mean physically?
Yeah, I could have built a house.
So you can physically build a house?
I can build a house, yeah.
Can you?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Out of what?
Well,
wood?
No, you idiot. No, out of foundations, bricks, mortar.
Really?
RSJs.
Really?
Do you know RSJs?
I know what an RSJ is, because I've seen 40 Towers.
What's an RSJ?
An RSJ is like a girder that goes across the top of a door.
It's a rolled steel joint.
Well, it's like a girder.
It is, yeah, but it's called a rolled steel joint.
Well, that doesn't matter.
It's an RSJ, okay?
All right. Because remember when the Irish guy puts
and got rid of the door.
Takes the door out and puts the wrong door in.
Yeah,
I'll go and put an RSJ in there, says the guy.
I know damp-proof courses. I know how to put one of those in the house. Yeah, I know how to...
Quite handy then.
Yeah, absolutely. How to get a,
Why don't you just build yourself a a house?
I could do. And to get a cable from the road to the house to supply electricity.
I don't believe you learned all this.
I did.
You never went to any classes.
Well, that was the one thing that interested me. Was
building a house.
Building a house, yeah.
Right.
That's the one thing that interested me, and I got a top mark actually in that exam because you took 5 papers. Didn't do so well on the rest.
Okay.
And that's what I would have done. But
you see the time, by the way.
So why did you ask me that question anyway?
Well, I just wanted to know what you learned when you were doing that urban estate management.
Anyway, so what I was saying is, this is on you said with your logarithms, right? If you wanted to become a land surveyor, then you had to. There was a book called The Valuation Tables for Chartered Surveyors, and they were just like logarithms.
Right.
You had to apply these to valuations of land and all this kind of stuff in perpetuity. The most complicated things I've ever read in my life.
Really?
I couldn't understand them.
Yeah.
Threw the book away. Got on
So
with
you should have
building
done
houses.
philosophy. You should have done philosophy. It's a lot easier to get.
No.
It's a lot easier to get. We are the two mics. We're going to do listography. We're going to choose a listography coming up next. We are the two mics. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to do our listography, which is where we basically get 3 things suggested to us to talk about. Sometimes list, and we will choose them in a moment. Just want to read you this from Woodenhead. He says, LOL, if he knows so much about fixing building issues, why is he always moaning about problems with his penthouse?
Well, because you get problems with... I mean, I can't fix the roof, can I? Unless I get a
apparently
cherry picker or something. And, and have to sort it out. Can I just point out
I'm just surprised that if you could actually physically build a house...
Yeah, I could.
That you wouldn't have bought a plot of land somewhere in the middle of nowhere and made it like a project to build a house.
When would I have had time to do it? That is the serious answer. When do I have time to do it?
You could have had time to do it during one of your periods of imposed gardening leave, for example.
Maybe you're right. Maybe I should have done it.
Because if I knew how to build a house, I'd build a house.
Yeah, okay. Well, as I say, it takes an awful lot of organisation because you can't do it yourself. You have to hire people like bricklayers.
Well, no, I thought you said you could do it yourself.
No, what I could do is, I can't operate a digger to dig the trenches where the foundations have to be laid. You'd have to get a guy in to do that with them little digger machines, right?
But you could do the technical drawings to show him what to do.
Yeah. You would have to get in scaffolders and bricklayers to build the walls because I'm not a bricklayer.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Well, so you can't build a house then.
I can build a house.
No, you can't.
I can.
You told me you could build a house.
Right, I'll tell you something. Right, if I had 25 volunteers, and they were volunteers, and
so they weren't expert bricklayers.
Exactly,
like
and we're going to build a house, and then we're going to hand it over to charity or something like that. Yeah. Just by looking at manuals and that sort of thing, I could build a house.
From journals alone?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I could.
Well, I think you should do it. I think it should be a project for you.
Well, maybe. I'll tell you who I really admire now. I'll get to that in a minute. Got to just correct one factual thing, please. And I'm very grateful to a chap called Whites, 2015. He says Roger Taylor, the drummer, so I said it was John Deacon. Yeah. John Deacon was the guitarist, of course, So thanks for correcting that. Roger Taylor, the drummer, wrote Radio Gaga, inspired by his 2-year-old son.
Okay, fair enough.
And thank you for that. The rest of the story I read from the lips of Roger Taylor.
Peter says this, Porky, it was probably a good thing the music was too loud when you were on the prowl in clubs.
Yeah, it probably was, actually. Probably saved
I can't imagine anything worse than you on the prowl in a club.
Probably saved a lot of young ladies from, a fate worse than death.
Yeah, probably
now,
did.
Apparently it's something going on in Coronation Street as we're on air here, and I'm glad people listen to us and not watching that.
Right.
But apparently there's some very graphic stuff going on.
Really?
For instance, Patricia says, hang on, this is way too graphic for this time of night on Corrie.
Really?
And one of our regular correspondents has also said, this is too in your face.
Really?
Trying to find that one. Lady Eilina has said, I don't believe what I'm seeing on Coronation Street. Talk about in your face. What happened to the TV watershed? Rein it in. No. So I think we'll have to make some investigations.
Well,
here.
I mean, I have to say, the last time you made a reference to Coronation Street, I think it was in Listography, not Listography, Porky Vision, last week.
Yes.
And people then came back and said that had happened about 3 months ago.
Well, that's right, yeah.
So you're obviously a bit behind on the old storylines.
I'm a bit
surprised you haven't come across. Well, maybe you can mention it in Porky Vision on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think that's a good
idea.
What do you think?
Now, Brian is suggesting, but go through some Listography, shall we? See if we can pick one.
Yes.
The 3 noisiest places you've ever been.
3 noisiest places
you've ever been? I'm not sure you could do 3 noisiest places you've ever been.
Okay.
Well, think about it. 3 things you wish you'd never said.
3 things you wish you'd never said.
That might be difficult as well.
Yeah.
Money, no object, 3-car garage. So what 3 cars would you have in a garage?
That's not bad.
3 favourite drinks. I think we've sort of done something like that. 3 favourite lines from a movie or 3 favourite movie characters.
Yep.
You could do that.
Quite like that.
3 favourite British towns.
Yeah, I like that.
You like that?
I like that.
3 favourite quotes or sayings. 3 favourite toys you had as a child.
The three favourite quotes is quite good, isn't it, for you and I, for considering what
you're
we've...
going to get them right, though.
Well, that's part of the challenge, isn't it?
Is it?
Is it? Do you fancy that?
Well, we could do that. But the trouble is, it's three favourite ones. It will be three that come to you, you know, because you might know three favourite quotes, but you might not remember exactly what they are.
Yes, I see what you mean.
I don't mind.
And you might have kidnapped them over the years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Let's see. Three pieces of advice you'd pass on to the next generation if you were on your deathbed.
Yes.
Quite interesting.
Yeah.
Get me
a drink, please.
Three jobs in order of likelihood that you would have had if you hadn't become journalists.
Yeah, no, I quite like that.
You like that?
I quite like that.
Okay.
Do you like that?
Yeah, you could have been a house builder, right? We already know one of them.
Could have been a house builder.
All right, let's do that one then. That's from Rodney.
Okay, so three professions other than what we did.
Yes, things that we would have ended up doing.
Okay.
If we hadn't been journalists.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. Okay, right. And we can tell the story of how it might have happened.
I'm going to tweet this one out then.
Okay, please do. Yeah. Now I was going to say to you that the story about a house builder, right?
Yeah.
Now Steve Morgan.
Steve Morgan?
Yeah, Steve Morgan is the man who wanted to become chairman of Liverpool.
Oh, right.
And then took
over... we know another Steve Morgan.
We know another Steve Morgan.
You're not talking about him?
I'm not, no. I'm talking about Steve Morgan, who is the man who... I think he's still the owner of Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Is he?
But I think he has made it clear that, you know, if anyone wants to come in and bid for the club, he may be open to an offer. But he tried to... He's an absolutely avid Liverpool fan.
Yeah.
And at one time he had a great... ambition to become the chairman of the club because from nothing he made himself incredibly wealthy, a hugely successful businessman.
Yeah.
And he was in
not from the football though. Presumably.
No, not from the football. He was in the house building business.
You don't get rich.
If you want to look him up on your machine, I think
Steve Morgan.
I think it was Redrow. I think was his.
I've heard of them.
Was his house company,
right.
I've read a bit of the history of him, and he literally started with one house. This guy literally got it together, you know, enough money to buy the materials and found the plot of land and built one house.
What? So just had it built, as it were, not built himself, presumably.
Yeah, I think he largely built it himself, I think.
Stephen Peter Morgan, CBE.
Yeah.
English businessman, philanthropist and former chairman of Wolverhampton Wanderers.
That's it, yeah.
That'll be him.
And is it Redrow,
yes, it is, yeah.
Redrow, that's right. Well,
Redrow PLC.
He made it extremely successful, and then he he copped out. I don't know whether he sold it or...
sold his shares.
Or floated it and then took it back into private... I don't know.
His hometown is Garston, Liverpool.
That's right, absolutely, yeah. But anyway, he went back and made it successful again. Very, very successful. But I read a bit of his story, and he literally did build one house.
Yeah.
And then what he found out a formula, which I read in something he said, and that is that you can build a house, I think it's in 6 months. I think it takes 3 months to build it, and then 3 months to sell it, and then you've doubled your money.
Right.
Because when you build a house with all the materials that you have to get together to build a house... the house becomes worth twice what the materials are once it's a house.
Yes, but doesn't that also depend on the vagaries of the housing market as well?
Exactly.
Because, I mean, that's the problem. A lot of people think if you buy property, you will automatically make money.
Sure.
And that's where it all went wrong.
Sure, but generally speaking, you know, if anybody built their own house, by the time it's built, it would be worth twice what it cost to build it.
This guy borrowed £5,000 from his dad in 1974 to buy his then employer's Wellington Civil Engineering,
right,
which was on the verge of going out of business.
Okay.
So for £5,000, he then turned that into Redrow.
Yeah, and that's right. Started building houses and all that kind of stuff.
And it became a FTSE 250 company.
That's right, absolutely. I mean, incredible success story. So that's what I'm saying. It's a very basic thing, isn't it, to be a bricklayer and learn how to build your own house. But if you've got the drive and initiative and the genius...
Well, yeah, again, but you're picking on somebody who is a very unusual guy. I mean, a 2016 Sunday Times Rich List estimates his net worth at $880 million.
Yes. It's not
bad, he's not just a guy that's built a house, really, is he?
Well, no, but he started off building a house.
Yeah, but you can't become just like him, can you?
Well, yes, you can. If you've got enough drive and initiative and
I hope this is not going to be the sort of advice you're going to be giving to young members of your family.
No.
You can turn into Steve Morgan.
Do you realise that he comes from Garston, Merseyside, right? He's richer than Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney's wealth in the last Sunday Times Rich List was about 760 million or something like that.
Yeah.
He's made himself richer than Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
I met him at the World Cup in Germany.
Oh, did you?
I had access to the England hotel because of my, former my former connections with the Football Association.
Incredibly, they still let you back in.
Which were highlighted today, by the way, on a bit of video.
Yeah, somebody sent out that video. Why was that? It was when Eric Cantona had to go to the
hearing.
The hearing.
For the ban.
And you're standing there literally holding the door open.
Yeah, that's right,
for him.
Yeah, for Eric Cantona. Yeah, but I mean, that's because...
Why, was that an anniversary or something today?
I don't know. Somebody just must have found it, but I was there. I was looking after Eric Cantona on the day. Anyway, the point of my story is, we went into the England Hotel, you know, saw my friends there and all that, and he was standing there in the bar, and I just went up and said hello. Hello, mate.
You recognised him?
I recognised him immediately because he'd been bidding to try and get a foothold in Liverpool at the time.
Right.
And we had a very, very nice, very amiable chap, but I didn't realise it was worth 880 million.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I should have kept in touch.
You would have been more sort of grovelling to him otherwise, wouldn't you?
Probably.
You probably would have said, by the way, I can do just what you did. I can build a house too.
I can build a house.
Can I borrow £5,000?
Absolutely.
Now, we've got lots more coming up in the next hour. We're going to be talking to Mike Rutherford, who's a motoring journalist. He's going to tell us why he thinks private number plates are naff.
Yes.
You've got quite a few, and I'm going to find out why you've got so many of them, particularly when you don't use them.
Yes.
We're going to do a bit of listography as well. Lots more to come. We are the Two Mikes. Good evening, I'm Mike Graham, he's Mike Parry, you're listening to Two Mikes. We're here all week, 7 to 10, released until Thursday anyway, and then we're off again for another couple of days, which is always nice. Lots more to come in this hour. We're going to talk to Mike Rutherford, who's a motoring journalist, about private number plates. He thinks they're a bit naff. And I have to say, I do tend to agree with him. We're also going to be doing listography tonight, and the chosen subject, of course, is the one where we're going to nominate 3 jobs that we would have done if we hadn't actually become journalists, which should be very interesting indeed. Porky, of course, said that he can build his own house, so anybody who'd like to send in more pictures of what his house would look like, you're more than welcome to do so. You can tweet us at the Two Mikes. You're listening to the Two Mikes with me, Mike Graham, and Mike Parry. Now, Woodenhead has raised an interesting point, and I've kind of forgotten about this. Don't you both own a plot of land in the Scottish Moors?
We do.
Get Porky to build a house on it.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's got a good point, because we kind of forgot about that. We were supposed to go and visit the plot, weren't we?
We were.
Because very kindly, one of our listeners sent us, I think it was a Christmas present, wasn't it, last
year?
Yeah. A couple of little plots of land somewhere up near, I think it's up near Glencoe somewhere.
I think it is. Do we know even how much land there is there?
Well, you know, it came in a lovely package.
It did.
It's all sort of, in an
and I know exactly
envelope.
where that is at home, yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly where it is as well. And I looked at it one day, and I think I got disturbed in the middle of doing it. So because my plan was to spend the day just kind of studying it and seeing exactly what size it was and exactly where it was.
I kind of got the impression, and I hope I'm not being
ungrateful
or unkind to our donor, that it was probably about the size of a waste paper bin or something like that.
Well, I think you might have been slightly disingenuous.
Think a bit bigger?
Well, yeah, I think so. I presume a parcel of land does not come in anything smaller than, say, a square metre. Would it be?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
what would be the point of having land like the size of a postage stamp?
Well, just to say that you're a Scottish landowner, you see what I mean?
It's a bit like buying a star or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, buying a star or something like that. I mean, you've got to remember that how many people got ripped off in the Go West Young Man era in America when people were rushing over to California.
Yeah.
Buying, plots of land.
But then people were selling land they didn't own, though, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah, it was all
but this is all done like properly and.
You know the cleverest thing that Ken Bates ever did when he was the chairman of Chelsea.
Yeah.
And I have to say Ken was an old friend for many years.
Was he?
Controversial figure. Controversial figure, but he decided. And actually, it caused problems for the new owner, Mr. Abramovich, later on. But he decided that the best way to protect the football ground, that is Stamford Bridge, where Chelsea play, from property developer predators, because it's a prime location, it's down the Fulham Road, which runs parallel to the King's Road.
And it's happened, of course, to Arsenal, it's happened to West Ham.
Absolutely. Was to create an organisation called Chelsea Pitch Owners Association.
Yes.
And my friend Richard King was the boss of that for
so everybody had
a
piece of the actual pitch.
Yeah, but it was all they had was 3 inches square.
Right.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So that it would.
Well, that's different, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, it is different, but it is still a land thing. It would have meant that for any developer to come in and acquire, the ground, they'd have to acquire the pitch, and to acquire the pitch, they'd have to have come to individual deals with maybe 10,000 individual people.
It's like that story of PJ Clark's, isn't it, in New York, where PJ Clark's sits on 3rd Avenue,
right?
And it's one of the few. I think it's a 2-story building in the midst of all these skyscrapers.
Yes.
And what they basically did was they people kept saying to them, look, we'll give you millions and millions and millions of dollars if you just move away.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't move.
No.
And it was all about the airspace above the actual building itself, which somehow I think they managed to acquire. So that they actually owned the.
But why didn't they just sell it for millions?
Because they didn't want to. Because they had an attachment to the place. I mean, it's a very old bar.
It is a very old bar.
And it's been there for probably.
Is it green on the outside?
It's green and white, yeah.
Green and white,
and it's a lovely. You go into the bar and it's this lovely old wooden long kind of bar.
Yeah.
Then in the back room, it's got a great little kind of. Funnily enough, you talk about tablecloths. There's red and white sort of gingham tablecloths, and the waiters are all wearing the white aprons.
That's right.
It's a fantastic place. These are some of the greatest hamburgers ever made.
It is, yeah.
And I guess they've always just wanted to keep it as it is.
Totally agree.
You know,
totally,
I mean, we
totally
had Peter Stringfellow here the other day saying that he was selling his club. You see, the Sky were interviewing him actually.
I know.
Almost a week after we did.
Yeah, well, I think we drew the attention to the fact
Well, we
that
did.
I mean, he's a legendary man, Peter Stringfellow, in this country because he's not London centric.
No.
He started in Manchester.
Yeah.
He actually said to me in this very
had
studio,
clubs all over the world.
You mean the Millionaires Club? And that's right.
But I mean, he's basically done exactly what you've said that PJ Clark should do. He was offered so much money to vacate the premises that he was in that he couldn't turn them down. And speaking of that, right, I've been meaning to tell you this since the start of the show because we were talking about James Bond right at the beginning. There's a piece of what might be described as celebrity gossip going around at the moment, saying that Daniel Craig is now odds-on to continue as James Bond.
Is he?
Because they've made him a more elaborate offer, $150 million for 2 more films.
2 more films, yeah.
Previously, he's thought to have turned down about 60 million quid or $60 million to do one.
Didn't he say I'd rather stick needles in my eyeballs than do another James Bond film?
While he was doing the PR for Spectre.
Yeah, but that's just a bit of wily sort of business dealing, isn't it?
Maybe it is.
I mean, Chris Tarrant, for years and years and years, and we've had Chris on our various shows a couple of times over the years. I mean, when he was what you could call Britain's top DJ at Capital Radio, every year at the same time, I remember him saying, I'm so tired of getting up at this time, I can't do it again.
Right.
And every year, you know, got a £1 million increase in the you know, it's the way people do things.
We've never quite perfected that art of negotiation, have we?
No.
Now, so according to the odds makers, Daniel Craig is now odds on with your man from Poldark, Aidan Turner, as kind of joint second.
So has old Tom Hiddleston fallen down?
He's fallen down at 14-1.
Oh.
James Norton's at 5-1. Jack Houston is at 6-1. Idris Elba 14-1.
Yeah.
And then it goes down to Damian Lewis 25-1. Michael Fassbender.
See, I think that's going to be a very difficult decision because I would rate all of those that you've read out. Yeah. I would rate them all as great potential.
I think Damian Lewis would be very good.
Damian Lewis would be very good.
Idris Elba would be great.
I think Idris Elba would be brilliant. I think he's got great way about
Aidan Turner would be too much like Pierce Brosnan.
Well,
and he'd have to take his shirt off every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I suppose so. Aidan Turner. I know what you mean about him being a bit wooden, but I think he's just being a bit Poldark. I don't think he is wooden.
Really?
I think I'd love to see.
I've not seen him in anything else. That's the problem.
I'd love to see Peaky Blinders lead actor.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I've forgotten his name.
Yeah, I've forgotten his name as well.
Yeah, so he's brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, Kieran.
It's not Kieran, no.
Cillian Murphy.
Cillian
Murphy would be brilliant. Listen, let me ask you this.
I don't think he's got the right look, though, for James Bond, because he's got very unusual eyes.
Do you know what he'd be better as? A great James Bond villain.
He would.
Wouldn't he?
Tremendous.
Yeah, tremendous James Bond villain. Now, how often do you shop in places like Bond Street, Regent Street, all that kind of stuff?
Very rarely.
Really?
I would say, well, partly because it's such a drag to get to.
I agree, yeah.
I mean, I've got sort of Canary Wharf more or less on my doorstep, right? So if I want to go, they've got John Lewis there if I need to go and do that. It's around, I would say around about Christmas time.
Yeah, okay.
I sometimes go there because I have to for one reason or another.
Because the reason I ask, and you'll throw this back at me, there's on this research paper, right, which shows that rich shoppers in great streets walk past those who are looking for help. Whereas ordinary shoppers in places like Canary Wharf, you know.
Well, no, you don't see any beggars in Canary Wharf.
No, maybe not in Canary Wharf.
Why? Because it's a private island.
Yeah, that's right. It's private.
Well, it's not an island, but I mean, it's a private estate.
But, you know, in an ordinary high street, say Nottingham or Cambridge or Liverpool.
Well, we saw quite a few in Edinburgh, didn't we?
Yeah, we did see quite a few in Edinburgh. But they'd come because the festival was there and there was money there. But it says someone in distress is more likely to receive help from strangers on an ordinary street than those in an area teemed with luxury goods and stores like Bond Street and Regent Street.
Well, I'm surprised that if you were a beggar, that they'd even let you settle anywhere in Bond Street.
Well,
they would just move you on.
I don't think it's that. I think it's the sort of situation where, you know, if somebody's walking along and the bottom of the bag falls out, you know what I mean, and everything spills all over the pavement. Yeah. Well, in Cambridge or Nottingham, somebody might stop and say, "Oh, you're all right," try and help. But I think in Bond Street and Kensington Street, you'd be told, "What are you messing up the street?"
But also because you might suspect it was some kind of scam.
Yeah, maybe.
Did you see that scam? There was one the other day, which I read about, where a guy, there were some people sitting outside a pub, and there was a person, for some reason, they knew this guy had something valuable in his rucksack.
Yes.
And this guy came crashing through a hedge, right?
No, it's through the door. It was through the door of the pub garden.
But through the garden. Yeah. But was it not through the hedge?
No,
sure?
No, I'll tell you exactly what happened.
Because people got so distracted, and then the other guy just took the bag.
It was brilliant. It was somewhere near...
Well, I think you should describe it as brilliant.
No, I'm saying this scam was brilliant, you know. But I mean, not brilliant in the sense of...
but it's not very nice, though.
No, it's not very nice. No, it's not very nice. But what happened is, it was near the jewellery district, right? The guy leaves work with £35,000 worth of jewellery goods in his bag.
And everyone knew it was, well, the robbers knew it was there.
Well, the robbers did, but the thing is, instead of telegraphing it by having a suitcase with a pair of handcuffs.
Because we were talking about this before, because if you're walking around with your handcuffs, you're handcuffed to a case, everyone's going to know you've got something in it.
Absolutely. So this guy just literally had it in an ordinary rucksack.
Yeah.
The sort of thing that I describe as the rucksackers, you sling it over, but not a very big one.
But
not
you would despise him for having your rucksack. But if you knew he had 30,000 quid worth of stuff in there, then you'd like him.
I'd admire him. So anyway, what happens is this guy literally goes for a pint after work, and it's a pub that's got a pub garden. And he is sitting there, and his bag is literally next to him, on the seat next to him.
Right.
And he's supping his ale, and what happens is, one member of the gang literally comes bursting through the pub garden door as though he's been knocked down or something.
That's why I thought there was a hedge involved.
No, there was no hedge involved, and the door bangs open, and it bangs against the hinges, and everybody looks up, and in that second, the second member of the gang whipped the bag next to the jeweller and was away. And within seconds...
They haven't caught them yet, right?
No, haven't caught... Well, I haven't read that they caught them.
No, neither have I. Now, it wouldn't be, so shall we say, unwise or possibly wrong to suggest that did the guy in the garden with the bag actually know this was going to happen?
Well, you can't say that.
No, you can't. I'm not saying it. I'm saying, but some others might suggest that.
What, you think he might have been the third member of the gang?
It's pretty unusual, isn't it? For something like that to happen.
Well, it's very unusual, but...
I mean, if I had 30,000 quid worth of jewellery in my rucksack, I wouldn't have gone to the pub. I'd have gone to wherever you're supposed to take it.
Well, no, he's taking it home. That's the point. He was taking it home.
Yeah, well, wherever. If you've got a safe at home, you take it home, you put it in the safe.
Yeah, but
don't you?
The only thing I would say is, and I do this on trains sometimes in case my memory slips me or I've had a drink or something.
Oh, yeah.
If I've got
highly unlikely.
I've got something valuable that I do not want to lose, I literally wrap it around my wrist.
Yeah.
So it can't be parted from me.
Well, that's all right if you can wrap it around you. You mean like a bag?
Well, no, but I mean, you take a rucksack, it's got drawstrings at the top or something like that. You wrap those around your wrist.
Right.
If I had something valuable and I thought I mustn't get off the train without this, because I left my sister's bag on the train once, 150 quid.
Yes.
And I had to go and buy another one. It was a birthday present, So I make sure I don't do it anymore. But no, I think for you to insinuate...
I'm not insinuating that.
Well, I think you are.
No, I'm saying that it's an unusual sort of situation, and it wouldn't be... I mean, obviously the investigation's going on. There's all kinds of legal reasons we can't talk about that. Yeah. But nobody's been charged yet. I just wonder, it just seems a very odd set of circumstances.
It could have been an insider job.
Well, it was obviously some kind of inside job because these two other guys knew about it.
Yes, well, that's true.
So somebody was giving information out.
Or it could just been that they've been watching the shop for a week, literally, and saying, what's his modus operandi?
Yeah, maybe.
And he goes in that garden, he has a beer and all that.
Maybe.
Right, we can do it. You know what I mean? These sort of things happen.
Well, they got very lucky, though, didn't they? They happened to have 30,000 quid worth of stuff.
They must have known that there was something in that bag.
Mean.
Yes.
That's
it's
shocking stuff.
It's true.
Shocking stuff. Now, even more shockingly, we're going to reveal about your private number plates coming up shortly.
Okay.
Because Mike Russ is the show, isn't there?
Absolutely.
You just can't do one show without some Beatles
music. I didn't ask for that record to be put on, but it's it's the most obvious car song, isn't it, for a long time?
Because we're going to talk to Mike Rutherford now from Auto Express, a man that we've both known, I suppose, for many a year.
Many years, yes.
With probably more years than we care to remember. Mike, a very good evening to you.
Well, I think it's the case of the three mics, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is, Mike.
It certainly is.
It's great to hear from you. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. Yes. And I hope you're well.
Yeah, very well. Same to you guys.
Now, we understand you may have a bit of an exclusive for us a little bit later on. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, are you surprised that the amount of money that is being spent on private number plates and sort of vanity number plates is actually going up?
And exceeding £100 million
in
the last year.
It's crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, no, I'm not surprised because you've got to remember that a lot of people, a lot of supercars, a lot of Ferraris and Lamborghinis and all these mega cars that are on the market are being snapped up these days, not as automotive products, but more as investments. It's not whether somebody buys a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, it's whether they buy a Ferrari or a work of art or a Ferrari and a collector's watch. And sadly, that means that the market is being sort of overrun almost by investors rather than real car nuts. And part of that investment is the number plate. Put your money into what's considered a decent plate today, and it will probably go up to the same sort of degree that house prices go up.
Well, the most expensive one, Mike, and honestly, sometimes it makes you laugh, but it's very serious. £180,000 for KR15, and read 5 as an S, HNA, Krishna, as in Harry. Yeah.
Absolutely. You see, I inquired years ago about MR1, just out of interest. I can explain to you why I wouldn't touch a I wouldn't touch a personalised plate even if I got one for free.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't mind one as an investment, but personally, I hate driving cars with them on. And when I just, for research purposes, said to one of the experts in the field, how much is MR1, as in Mike Rutherford 1?
Yeah.
He said, well, it's not MR1, old boy, is it? It's Mr. 1.
Yeah, of course.
Number one man. So whatever your initials are, they can always turn it, so that it has a double meaning, and that, ups the price massively.
Yeah, well, mine, of course.
Mike Parry here has got, 2 or 3 of them, right?
Well, no.
But you've never used them.
No, but if I went after the one for my own name, MP1, I'm competing with 650 members of the House of Parliament.
Yeah. Maybe get it off Keith Vaz.
Even with your wealth, Mike, you couldn't compete with.
No, it was £250,000. It was up for sale.
But you've got get this, Mike. This is very weird. He's got 2 or 3 personalised number plates, but he doesn't actually put them on his car.
Well, I'll tell you why, Mark. I took them as an investment. When Wayne Rooney was 17 and he was the greatest footballer in my firmament because he was playing for Everton and England at the same time, I bought R999, but the circle in the 9 was big and the tail on the 9 was small, NEY. So it's spelt Rooney.
Right.
And you must. I mean, it's very easy to get a value on it. I mean, you probably paid 250 quid for it at the time or something.
No, I didn't. I paid 2,450.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
You paid. In other words, you paid too much for it at the time. So what's it worth? So what's it worth now?
I don't know because I haven't had it valued.
Why don't you offer to sell it to him?
Because he could get a much better one than that anyway. I also had one which was R10NEY, which was, like sort of Rooney, if you see what I mean. So
they're not actually personalised number plates for you.
No.
They're for him.
Yeah.
That's even more bonkers.
Well, yeah, I suppose it is, but I thought at the time it was a great investment. I thought Rooney was going to become, and he may still be regarded as this, as the greatest footballer of all time, certainly the greatest English footballer. So it may still be worth an investment, I don't know.
Is it still the case?
It seems to me, mate, far from it for me to advise you on because your footballing knowledge is superior to mine. But you should have been doing this around the middle of his career rather than the autumn of his career, which is where I understand he is at the moment.
Well, I did buy them at the start of his career, you see, and I thought this would be a long-term investment. But then again, I bought lots of football memorabilia in those days.
Have you been drinking before you bought these?
I probably had been drinking.
I mean, is it the case? Sorry, Mike, if I can just ask you, is it the case you can't? Because in America, if you want to have a number plate which says anything you like, basically, you can just have it made up. But you can't do that here, right? You have to buy one that's already there.
Yeah, I mean, the basic rule in America is if you get to it before anyone else gets to it, it's yours.
Yeah.
But of course, the government never miss a trick, do they? And successive governments never miss a trick. DVLA has turned into a money-making machine.
Well, I find that outrageous, to be honest, because if they'd sold a licence to a company to be able to trade in these personalised number plates, fine. But this money, this 100 million a year, is going directly into the coffers of the government by preying on people's vanity who've got more money than sense.
Yeah, and why not? What I say is why not? If they can raise the money and people want to voluntarily pay the money, that's fair enough. It's a two-way arrangement. Why not put that money into road safety investment, for example, so that we make the road safer, rather than just going to the gratuitous pile. I'll bore you guys to tears with a figure that I've run past you probably in the past, but the figure now is we're talking billions with a B. So £1,000 million per week plus is paid in motoring taxes. So 50-60 billion pounds a year are paid in motoring taxes.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, of course, they've got all their fines and all their income from number plates and all those additional things.
Yeah, no, it is an outrage. The other outrage, Mike, is that if you buy one of these and you don't put it on your car, then they write to you every year and say, do you want to retain ownership of this? And if you don't pay them 75 quid, they take it back.
Yeah, well, I mean, exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Mike. They're appealing to people's vanity.
Yeah.
And, of course, the other thing is it's a good way for people to hide the true age of their car. Perhaps if you don't want to be seen in an aging car.
It is. You're absolutely right.
But I think it's a bit naughty when, coach operators, for example, use that tactic, because I, as a parent, would want to know the sort of vehicle and the sort of age of the vehicle that's on the school run, the school bus.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I suppose if you've paid 300,000 or 400,000 for some kind of supercar, you don't want just a run-of-the-mill number plate on it either.
I suppose not. The other thing is, Mike, I think it might be Pimlico plumbers, but it's certainly some. All their number plates are things like tap 20 and pipe 1 and all this kind of stuff, and so they've used it commercially to stimulate interest in their company, which I suppose is acceptable and quite clever.
Yeah, I would just say to people, do bear that in mind when you use their services, because you're paying for that as the customer.
I suppose you are, yeah.
No, exactly right. Now, what's the story you may have for us, Mike?
Yes.
Oh, there's no may about it. I mean, you're going to say to me, you're going to ask me after I tell you this if I've been drinking alcoholic beverages, but I can tell you it's the honest truth. Tomorrow it will, and I'm involved in this project, not in a commercial sense, but I will be at the event tomorrow in London. The world unveiling of a car that I've already driven, but it won't be seen by press, public and others until tomorrow. And it is the flat pack car.
The flat pack car? Is it coming? It's not coming from IKEA, is it?
It's, that brand is one that the manufacturers mention often in terms of how that Scandinavian company has revolutionised the furniture world.
Right.
And they're doing exactly the same with quite a large motor vehicle with a proper 2.2 litre diesel engine at this stage, which just drops into the car. In fact, you just lift the car onto the engine. That's how it works. And there's no instructions. There's no written instructions with it. There's just diagrams, comes in with diagrams. And the idea is it will be sold around the world. So it can actually be built out in the field, as it were. So it could be sent to a remote area that's in need of a community vehicle in the wilds of Africa or Asia somewhere.
How big is the box? How big is the box it comes in?
Well, it comes in a container. So think of a container.
Yeah.
And inside a container, you've got 6 cars and 6 engines.
Right.
And, to save on packaging, which takes up an awful lot of space, the packaging for the flat pack, if you like, the contents of the flat pack is contained in the exterior panels of the car.
Right.
And it's the sort of car, because it's, it's a car that's going to be used out in the field. It doesn't matter if the exterior panels get a bit scratched or a bit scuffed.
Yeah.
This is a car that could be built in disaster areas, for example. They could be dropped in a container load, and 6 vehicles could pop out 12 hours later. 3 men would take 12 hours to build this thing. And guess what?
Yeah.
You get a set of just 20 spanners puts this car together. And here's a great little touch.
Yeah.
Once the car is built, those same 20 spanners, assuming you haven't lost them in the construction stage, are used for maintenance of the vehicle when it comes to oil changes and stuff like that in the months down the road.
So it's not the kind of thing that anyone could put together, though. I mean, if say, for example, you had to drop it into, South Sudan.
I think you could if you followed the instructions.
Are you saying that say the charity workers there for Oxfam could put this car together?
Look, people tend to be in disaster areas, or people who tend to be interested in cars, or people who are have got all sorts of motivation. They're usually pretty good with their hands. What I'm saying is, you don't need to be a skilled car worker.
No, right.
You probably need to be a good sort of DIY type person.
Sure.
If you can change the oil on the car, if you can hang a door on a door frame, you're the sort of person that could probably handle 20 spanners, and they say 3 people can put it together in 12 hours.
That is incredible. I tell you what, Mike, years ago when I was at university, my mate turned up, right? His father was a motor dealer, and he turned up in a Lotus 7, and he put that together from a kit. That was a kit car in those days. Yep. Is that the same sort of thing?
No, this is much, much easier. This is much more like the IKEA model where, basically a bunch of blokes, if I'm allowed to say that, crack open the thing, take all the binding off the pack, and they grab a handful of spanners each, and it's much simpler than those kit car things, which involve very complicated wiring and things like that.
Sure.
And I mean, is it? You may not be able to tell us this, but is it sort of what sort of budget is it aimed at?
They're looking to put it. I mean, it's all about economies of scale, Mike. I mean, if you had a one-off IKEA flat pack, it would probably cost 1,000 quid. But because of the economies of scale, you can buy a bookcase for 30 quid.
Yeah.
And of course, the same rule will apply with this vehicle. But they're looking for an on-sale price of £12,000, and it's a go-anywhere vehicle. It's an all-terrain vehicle, so it could be one day carrying people, lots of them, up to 12, 13 people, or it could also be carrying, pallet loads of goods. It could also be carrying water in Africa and Asia. And it's a vision, really, of the future. And I saw a frightening statistic, and that's that all the world's cars go to only 20% of the world's population.
Right.
And this car, potentially, could be going to those developing countries, in Africa and Asia and elsewhere, and could be providing things like ambulances, for example. Or what about vehicles, libraries, mobile libraries?
Sure.
Mobile internet vehicles.
One vital question here, Mike, and it's a serious question. Does the kit come with 6 gallons of petrol? Because you're talking about it going to remote areas and all that kind of stuff. Supposing they can put the car together, but they haven't got any access to fuel.
Well, that's a very good question, actually, because if we're thinking of developing nations, for example, there's no point in dropping a petrol engine car into a country where everything runs on diesel or vice versa.
Yeah.
So very much the engine is going to be geared up for the local conditions. So there's no reason why, for example, there can't be petrol versions, diesel versions, LPG versions. And it's also recognising the fact that in these sort of areas, because it's a less sophisticated market, let's put it that way, they tend not to service their cars regularly. Let's put it like that.
Sure.
And that's why, these are almost cars that will live without servicing. These are cars that will be living day by day with day-to-day sort of make it up as you go along repairs. And things like some of the filler bottles are not under the lid in the engine bay where people rarely look. Yeah. They're actually in the driving compartment. So if you want to top up the windscreen washer, it's right in front of you, opposite the passenger.
I see.
Sounds amazing. Well, we'll look forward to the unveiling of it officially, Mike. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for breaking that news on our show.
Yeah, sounds remarkable.
Excellent. Guys, it's a world exclusive.
It is.
It's a world exclusive. We're used to that here.
Thank you
Brilliant
very
stuff,
much
Mike.
indeed.
Thank you very much indeed. Mike Rutherford there from Auto Express. We'll talk some more about that car or that vehicle coming up. We've got to do listography as well, the 3 jobs that we would have been doing if we hadn't become journalists.
OK, folks, we're back here. We've got another half hour to go on the 2 mics. And the reason I'm talking to you now is because old MG's just been rebooting his computer.
Yes, I
have you rebooted it successfully?
I have. Yes, I think I have. Yeah,
Good.
And basically, we've got to do listography, haven't we?
We certainly have.
So normally, what we do is we have a little bit of music for that, I suppose, which we could play in.
I'm sure we can.
Any particular point. We haven't had any Freddie Mercury yet, have we?
No, we haven't had any Freddie Mercury. Do with the Freddie Mercury song, please.
We could. Maybe it's the last song on the show.
To commemorate his 70th birthday.
Maybe it's the last song on the show. But this was from Rodney, this particular listography, and it's about the 3 jobs you would have been doing if you hadn't been a journalist.
Okay.
So should we try and get some kind of music to go along with it?
Yeah, and that could be something to do with work, something with a job, like something like a profession or something like that,
Working on a chain gang.
Well, what about I heard it on my radio? That combines both, doesn't it?
You could try
because we are radio broadcasters, and Freddie Mercury
produced
the song.
Yeah, you could do a bit of that. Should we go with something like that?
Let's go with something like that. Sure, it'll come off any second. Here we go.
There we go. There was never much doubt in my mind that I would be a journalist, actually, from the moment I kind of got into that kind of age of deciding what it was I wanted to do. But I had a couple of things in mind that I
So why did you go to university then and do something else?
Well, I didn't really. I went to university because it seemed like the right thing to do.
Well, everybody did.
And I mean, not everybody did, of course, because back in those days it was only about something like 5% of the people.
No, but everybody did on your sort of social strata level, and mine did.
Yeah, I suppose. But I mean, like my sister did, which was the main thing. And then my girlfriend was going. I mean, the only reason I went to Bath University was because I was going out with this girl at the time. Who said she was going to go to Bath University, and then she didn't go.
No, she didn't go, so you did.
Funnily enough, instead, she went to UCL in London.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, your daughter has just graduated
and then we broke up.
Yeah, amazing. The thing is, at my school, the King's School Chester, anybody who didn't go to university
Was a bit of plank.
Well, no, they were just odd. What are you doing? There was one guy there.
Well, because the issue wasn't money then, is it? Was it? You just went anyway because you got free grant.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But there was one guy there, and his name was Fluff Fairclough, okay?
Fluff Fairclough. That could have been his real name.
Well, the thing is, at the time, there was a very famous DJ who used to do Pick of the Pops called Fluff.
Alan Freeman.
Yeah,
I remember.
Fluff. Yeah. And I don't know why they called Fluff Fairclough, but they did. And the point of my story is, this is a great story, actually. Has
this got anything to do with listography?
Yes, it has.
That's what we're doing now.
Yes, it has.
Okay.
It has. Because he should have gone on to some sort of academic career. But when he left school... And he was a rabid Liverpool fan. You used to see him around Chester sometimes wearing a denim Levi jacket with a huge motive of Liverpool Football Club on the left-hand side of his jacket.
The liver bird.
Yeah, the liver bird, red liver bird on white background. And when he was 18, everybody said, where are you going now, in university, all that? He said, I'm not. And he told his parents first, then he told the teacher at school and said, why? He said, this is absolutely true. He said, to be a true Liverpool fan, you have to be a member of the working class.
Right.
I'm going to be a plumber.
Okay.
And he went off to be a plumber.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Nothing. But, I mean, it was very unusual.
Right. Well, this is supposed to be about the three things you might have done.
Yes, exactly.
So I want to tell us the first one that you might have done if you weren't a journalist.
Well...
Apart from building houses, I suppose.
Yeah, okay. Well, I always wanted a job that was going to be very well paid.
Yeah.
Because that was my ambition in life.
Of course.
To be wealthy.
Yes.
And so
How's that gone?
Well, I don't know. It's by degrees, isn't it? But so the wealthiest people around in those days were solicitors.
Yeah.
You never, ever saw a solicitor who wasn't driving around in a Jag or a lawyer or a barrister or something like that. So I applied to Warwick University to do law, but they wanted like 2 A's and a B, and my grades were rubbish, because I didn't get...
You haven't really got a legal mind, either.
No, and I got distracted by women and drink when I was 17.
Well, didn't we all?
Yeah, exactly, that's right. But I went to the interview at Warwick and I saw all the, all the facilities that were there and all that kind of stuff, and I thought this would be good. 3 years of this, no problem at all, and then... I would join some sort of legal practice and then start my own legal practice because I thought any joker who went and became, just an employee of another legal practice, I'd start my own or become a partner in a big one. And I was determined I was going to do that. Thank God I didn't because it is one of the most boring professions in the world.
It can be. Although, funnily enough, I flirted a bit with the law as well. I did A-level law. I quite liked it, quite enjoyed it, and we did all sorts of torts, and it was basically civil law that we were doing. Yeah. And it kind of quite appealed to me. And funny enough, since then, I've got quite a few friends who are lawyers, and they've always said to me, "Well, you've got a bit of you've got one of those minds of a lawyer, which is actually kind of a sort of thing that people find very annoying." Well, because I pick them up on things all the time.
Yeah, excellent.
You find it annoying, I'm sure.
I'm sure I do. The funny thing is, when I became a trainee journalist, and I was at the Chester Chronicle, you mix with lawyers every day because you were in the magistrates' courts, right? And, for about 6 months, I thought I've made a terrible mistake here because I'm a bum, trainee journalist earning £20 a week. Yeah. And these guys, who were only about 5 or 6 years older than me, were driving around in Volvos, which was a great car in those days.
Well,
and attracting great-looking women who they were taking out for dinner and telling me all about it. And I thought, I've made a mistake. I've made a terrible mistake. Yeah. However, it all balanced out in the end.
It all came right in the end.
Their careers petered out probably, and mine didn't.
No, of course. And when you got to know some of the barristers at the High Court down in London,
yeah, exactly.
They had very, very expensive lifestyles. That's the story. All right, so we both actually would have been a lawyer, possibly. Okay, yeah. The second one for me, and would have been something in the entertainment business, like a roadie. I've always loved music. I always loved going to see bands, and I've always fancied the idea of being a roadie. Yeah. And now that I know a few other people in the business, you'd like to think that maybe you would have become, say, manager of a band or something like that, because that would suit me down to the ground. Okay. It's my kind of lifestyle. Out all night, sleep during the day. Yes. Make a reasonable amount of money. Yeah. And actually have quite an interesting life.
Well, as a roadie, you don't make a lot of money, do you?
Well, the roadies don't make a fortune, but there are ways of amplifying your income, shall we say.
I think Noel Gallagher started as a roadie with a group in Manchester, didn't he?
I think he did,
and then emerged from that,
Yeah, I think he did.
Well, my second one would have been, without a shadow of a doubt, an airline pilot. I would love to have been an airline pilot, but I had no sort of particular inkling for the
sciences.
The science of aerodynamics that you have to learn. Yeah. And the reason I wanted to be an airline pilot was because you fly to exotic places. All the hostesses are usually very good-looking women.
Of course.
Which would be a big plus.
Right. And you can swan around on somebody else's money, which is not a bad thing.
Swan around on somebody else's money, you stay in 5-star hotels. The work isn't onerous because once you've qualified as an airline pilot and you're the captain of the aircraft, then actually almost everybody else does the work, I'm told. And that includes the automatic pilot.
Yes.
So you don't have a lot to do. So that would have been terrific. I would love that. And I love, the exotic thought of saying, right, I'm going to work, darling. See you in a week. Oh, where are you going? Sydney.
Yeah.
Or San Francisco.
Yes.
Or Toronto.
Although a lot of them will tell you it's not as glamorous as it sounds.
Well, I don't think short haul is, because, when we came back from Edinburgh, we actually watched the people get off the plane. We would get back onto an hour later, and the turnaround was all held up, and that's why we were late and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that's terribly...
No. Well, a friend of mine works for that airline, funnily enough,
okay.
as an air steward.
Yes.
And, they have to stay on standby quite a lot of the time because they might have to fly, but they might not.
Yeah.
Because they don't know whether somebody's going to be ill and all that kind of
Sure.
thing, and they don't go anywhere particularly glamorous.
Sure.
But still, if you like that kind of thing,
Yes.
it's not a bad job.
Okay, and what would your third one have
My
been?
third one would have been a baker. Probably.
Baker, because you worked in a bakery
well,
as a youth.
I spent my formative years in a place called Lou's Patisserie in Hampstead.
Yes.
And got very friendly with the guy. In fact, at one point, when I was going to university, and I said, look, I have to leave now because I used to work. I worked there every weekend and all the holidays from the age of 14.
Yes.
So I got to about 18.
Yeah.
And he didn't have any kids, this guy. And he was a Hungarian refugee.
Right.
And had come from, you'd have loved him. He'd come from Hungary in
Rolls Royce, though,
1956. Panorama did a documentary about him.
Right.
Because he worked 3 different jobs until he could buy this place. Became a millionaire, basically, sort of, over the course of 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And he actually said to me, if you don't go to university and you stay here and become my kind of, number 2 guy, I'll leave all this to you.
Right.
So he would have left it all to me.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still alive, so I mean, I wouldn't have it.
He's still alive?
He's still alive,
How old is he now?
He must be probably 70, late 70s, maybe 80.
Maybe older.
Yeah. No, he's still running the place.
Do you still keep in touch with him?
No, but occasionally I see him, or if you're up in Hampstead, I occasionally go into the shop, and if he's there, I say hello.
Well, can't he still leave it all to you then?
Well, I don't think he wants to leave it all to me now.
Why?
I mean, I've worked there for years.
It doesn't matter, you were his prodigal son. Why
well,
not?
I was, because I went away.
I should go back and remind him.
Yeah, but I went away, though.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. You're back now. I mean, I'd get in there, man, if there's a load of dough.
Yeah, but now I don't want to do it.
If you get it, load of dough.
Very good. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
But he taught me an awful lot, not just about making cakes, but also just about life in general.
Right, there you go.
He was a very fine man.
Okay. Now, my third one, was that your third, by the way? That was your third. My third one was, I'd love to have been a university lecturer at Oxford or Cambridge.
Yes. But these are meant to be things that you could have done, as opposed to
well,
things
if I'd
that you
applied
wanted
myself,
to do.
I probably could have done.
Really?
I probably could have done. Now, what I'm
I saw a lot of lecturers today in sort of academic types.
Right, okay, yeah.
And none of them look anything like you.
No, I agree. But what I'm saying is, when I went for my interview at Brasenose College, Oxford, it was mesmerising. The sheer,
Majesty.
Majesty, that's right, yeah, of the, what do you call it? The City of the Rumbling Spires, which is Oxford. But
Is it the Dreaming Spires?
Dreaming Spires.
Not the Rumbling Spires.
Not the Rumbling Spires.
That's somewhere else.
Yeah, someone else, yeah.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, you walk in and out of these colleges and you think, wow, imagine immersing yourself in this sort of culture all your life. And when you see these great shows like Lewis, now that's based in Oxford, right?
It is, yeah.
And what you see is sometimes you see these students...
As was Morse before it.
Morse before it. Well, that was the predecessor to Lewis,
That's
wasn't it,
what I mean.
obviously. And what you see is, you see these guys go to about, the students go to about 3 seminars a week and 2 lectures. So I don't know what the blinking lecturers are doing all the time.
Well, they're writing books, aren't they?
Well, are they writing books and all this kind of stuff? But
Going to symposiums.
The only thing I would say is it may have been a bit dull and a bit too quiet for me. However, there did seem to be awful lot of time for bladderation possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, a very good male-female mix of people.
You've got to be very careful in university scenarios.
I'm not talking about students. I'm talking about...
I'm not talking about students either.
I'm talking about the fact that within that sort of society, if you were a dom...
Yeah, but you would last 5 minutes with
your
what I would kindly describe as your benevolent sexist attitude to women.
Well, no.
You wouldn't last 5 minutes.
Why?
Because they would have you kicked out. They'd probably have you crucified.
What for?
For, say, coming out with some of the things that you come out with.
What do you mean? What did I come out with?
Well, the stuff that you were upset... I mean, I'm telling you, listening to some of the stuff that I heard today.
Yeah.
If they heard you with your views on various things in life...
What, I think I should always buy a woman a drink when I take her out for dinner and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a hanging offence in one of these universities.
Well, that's ridiculous. But anyway, the point I'm saying is that it's a special sort of atmosphere in a special sort of medium, i.e. academic.
Yeah.
And it would have been a fascinating life, but probably too boring.
You might have found it too boring,
Probably too boring.
And you might have given something away. You might have been approached, though, of course, by the old Russians as well.
Well, of course.
If you were in one of those scenarios.
The old Kim Philby situation.
Yes, absolutely right.
Which, of course, I'd never have given into because, I'm 100% Anglo-Saxon British.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, we'll find out about that, I guess, in the current times. Got one here from Steve.
Yeah.
It says, Jeremy Vine's presenting Crime Watch. I'm sure Porky will turn up on his old mate's show before long.
Well,
puts two things together rather well.
Did you see today that I read a report this evening?
The woman's been charged.
The Evening Standard. No, the police have arrested the woman who was allegedly involved in the contretemps with Jeremy when he was on his bike.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
That story will run and run.
Yes.
That was Listography. We've got lots more to do, but not that much more time to do it in. We are the Two Mics. There will be a podcast coming out a little bit later on, probably in the morning, once it's all done and dusted. Yep. We've got a few other things to do, a bit of tweeting and messaging to read out as well. How about this from somebody who doesn't give a name, but they've texted it in to us. And you can text us, of course, by sending the word talk, plus your message to 87222. This one says, the darts player Bobby George physically built his own mansion.
Yes,
I can't imagine what that would look like.
Well, it'd be Bling Towers,
and he also says, I bet Porky couldn't even build a Wendy house. Maybe that should be a Porky challenge.
That's a bit harsh, isn't it?
I think you should build a house. I think it'd be quite good fun.
Well,
now, this one from Pete, who says, Porky, serious question. It's all money, money, money with you. Do you have any friends who haven't got a penny?
Well, yes, of course I have.
Really?
I mean, not everybody's career lasts as long as ours have done. Which I'm very grateful to, to the Almighty for, or whatever. And some of them peter out. I mean, the thing is, without a shadow of a doubt, when Fleet Street started closing down, I mean, we jumped off just in time. We jumped off the good ship Fleet Street and got into another medium, radio, television, whatever it was, just in time. Because some of the colleagues I worked with who were complacent, I said to them, newspapers are on a downward spiral.
The axe will fall eventually on you.
No, it'll see me through to the end of my career. Yeah. And what a lot of them were after, and I found this out on day one that I worked for the Daily Express in Manchester, was get your 40 quarters in, son. I said, what?
So you get the pension.
Get your 40 quarters in. And what you had to do is you had to get get your 40 years in. Not your 40 quarters,
years.
Your 40 years, yeah. Right. If you got your 40 years in...
40 quarters only 10 years.
Yeah, well, do you know what? That was in America. If you did 40 quarters in America, you got 10 years, you got a pension, didn't you? Yeah, Paul Condy told me that.
Did he?
Yeah. He said if you worked for 40 quarters...
sure he wasn't talking absolute cobblers?
Well, he talked a lot of cobblers, Paul.
He did.
You're absolutely right. But he actually said that if you completed 40 quarters with the green card and all that, you got a pension.
Oh, I see what you mean from the state.
Yeah, that's right.
It's probably not worth having, though. It'd be like the one here.
Well, anyway, sorry, the 40 years. So I got there when I was about 23, 24, I think. And they said, get your 40 years in, son. This is how short-sighted they were. They didn't realise the world was going to change so rapidly.
Who wants to think about a job in those terms? You want to do the same job for 40 years?
I was at least 10 years younger than the next oldest reporter at the Express. Yeah. I mean, talk about the stench of decay in an industry, right? And I said, why should I worry about, getting 40 years in? They said, because if you complete 40 years with this company, Beaverbrook Newspapers, as it was then, you get 2/3 of your final salary as your pension. Yeah. He said, nobody can take that away from you. Just think of that. In 40 years' time...
Which, of course, is now no longer the case.
It's not the case at all. When you're 63, you'll earn 2/3 of your final salary for the rest of your life. Yeah. You'll be living in clover as a pensioner, because, of course, pensions weren't very much in those days, So I said, I think I'd prefer, really, to think about each day as it comes, But, I mean, they used to do things like harass me for working on days off. Right. They used to do things like, when I was in Ireland, and I was there for nearly 18 months altogether, the father of the chapel, i.e. the head of the union, the newspaper union, would ring up and say, you've got to start taking days off. You haven't had a day off for 3 weeks.
But that was before Wapping as well, wasn't it? Before
of course
the whole
it was,
sort of business changed as well.
But the whole idea was that, if you can do it, the manager will think, we can do it. And as they were, at least some of them were 20 years older than me, they wanted to work less hours, not more, despite the fact that we had the most ridiculous working conditions where you only worked a 4-day week. Right. So
some of the production people who were the subs, for people who don't know the difference between, the sort of reporting side and the sub side. Yeah. When the Daily Express went later after you left, went to a 7-day operation, and I was going to put in charge of organising it all the subs on the Daily Express said, oh no, we can't work this new rota that you've put up because, our weekends are very valuable to us. Right? Yeah. But what they didn't tell the people that they were negotiating with, who were the management effectively, but I was kind of in between, was that they all did shifts on the Saturday.
Of course they did.
For the Sunday Express.
Yes.
And they didn't want to work a 7-day rota, which would mean that they wouldn't get any extra money for that.
Well, not only that, some of them didn't even work for the Sunday Express in the same group. No. They went to work for the Sunday Times or anywhere else.
But that was why their weekends were special. It wasn't because they wanted time with their families, it was because they wanted to make more money.
Exactly. So anyway...
So we soon blew that one out of the water.
Getting down to, have you got any friends who haven't got money? So... I am aware.
We haven't got any friends, period, have you? I mean, you've admitted that.
Yeah, well, that's true. But then not many people have. Not many people when you get to my age have. But anyway, so over the years, I heard stories of people who fell by the wayside. One of our old colleagues, I'm not sure if he was still there when you were there, he was a Northern Irish boy. He went back to Northern Ireland, and he was last heard of, and that's 10 years ago, driving a cab in Belfast, you know, because he just forgot to keep up with
the money.
Pace
dries
of
up eventually.
It just dries up, and that's where it goes. Another one I knew ended up, just completely out of the business altogether.
Yeah.
Trying to write books. Trying to, the next book was going to make his big fortune and all that. Couldn't get any work in newspapers anymore because he simply hadn't made preparations for the changing life.
Yeah. Well, the only people that I now know still
career
in the business who are, still okay in it are the ones who have gone very high up and who have stayed at that level because basically, if you do get to that level, you pretty much tend to be okay.
That's right. I totally agree. But who'd want to be a reporter on a Fleet Street
But now they don't.
newspaper
They don't hire them anymore.
Well, not only they're not hiring anymore.
I mean, what they tell me now is that every newsroom is absolutely rammed with online people who don't go anywhere.
Exactly.
They just come in and rewrite stuff.
That's right.
That's all they do.
That's right. And
the romanticism is gone.
And there's one group of newspapers, still you could sort of marginally say a Fleet Street group of newspapers, who haven't given any of their staff a pay rise for 8 years.
Yeah.
8 years.
And they won't be giving them one for